Star Wars. Senator. Chapter 1. Thalron Veridian. Where am I? I said as I stood up. I realized I was laying down. However, it wasn't on the ground. No, it was quite comfy. In fact, an extremely comfy bed. Opening my eyes, I looked around. I was situated in the middle of a white room. It was hyper-advanced with doors without knobs. It had a luxurious space with a desk. The chair had control panels on the arm holders and there was a small keyboard on the desk. However, it was like the keyboard on an iPad. Lastly, in the middle there was a flat energizing square. Looked something like a lamp in the table. Why? However, before I managed to even think about why, thousands of memories, scenes and events happened in my mind. My birth, in 48 BBY. Mother dying the same day. Memories of my dad teach me of my heritage, the Veridian family, Counts of Thyferra. Thyferra was an elective monarchy. 117 million in population. 80% Vratics, the native species, 20% humans. The Vratics was a less evolved species and was slave labor. Zotsixi was the capital city. We specialized in Bacta, being responsible for about 95% of all sales. 2 moons. 2 trade routes. Rima and Shapani. 479 days every year. 7% of the planet is water. Zukfra corporate headquarters is situated on Thyferra. House Veridian owns 25% of it. How we became rich due to Bacta. We were the major seller of Bacta, even though we only sold to Zukfra and Zoltan. We had no navy, and only about 40,000 solidars. We had a total of 100 Z-95 headhunters for planetary defense, but no naval hangar. However, we had 6 CR-90s. Each could hold 2 Z-95 headhunters. The CR-90 corvettes were also outfitted with 4 dual turbolasers and 6 single turbolasers. We had a total of 38,000 infantry forces. We also had a small unit of 200 ground armored tank, but it wasn't a droid. It was another type. We also had 500 gunners and lastly 1,000 royal guards. I was taught in politics, military leadership, economics and ruling since I reached the age of 7. The Count of the Veridian family has always held the supposition of senator. Usually it is given to the heir when he is of age, but a count can also have the position if he doesn't have an heir. It is currently 34 BBY, 2 years before the conflict on Naboo. Our economical situation. Extremely good. Although there is 117 million people living on the planet, there is only 29 million humans. 1 human is basically equal to 3 non-humans on Veridian. They can't vote, can't join the military, can't own a company. This is how we have been suppressing them. And the Bacta industry has been flourishing. The 2 major corporations have yet to work together to increase prices and therefore they sell a lot and need to buy a lot. From our more than 15 million Vratics working directly under us without selling their own. Our profits are 9 billion from Bacta and 14,625 million or 14.625 billion credits from our 25% of Zukfra. But we can't spend everything as we like. 14 billion goes to government spending, 100 million to government officials, 1,812 million to paying solidars, police and enforcers. Another 10% goes to the Republic. And after there's only 5,350 million, and of that we spend 350,000 on maintaining our current forces and equipment, including tanks, fighters and corvettes. 5 billion credits left. And of those, half is usually spent on Vratics or personal projects. My father preferred building the cities. Oh, and one last thing. My father died yesterday. Yeah, apparently we had a party and a bomb went off and he died. And I'm currently the Count of Thyferra. But holy shit. I'm actually in the Star Wars universe, and as the Count of a politically important planet. If my knowledge is right, then Thyferra joined the Confederacy of Independent Systems and was later taken over by the 2 Bacta companies by the order of the Empire. Basically this entire planet was enslaved. Even the humans. To create Bacta. Well, I would make sure that didn't happen. After 2 hours of simply processing the memories, I stood up. There was a lot of them. From basic stuff like drinks and food, to advanced political factions. I walked up to my desk and sat down. My memories has given me some information on how to use it properly. I pressed a button and a blue screen appeared from the thing in the middle of the table, apparently called a hollow disk. First of which allowed me to call my assistant. And yes, I have one. He is more of my personal guard or guard commander, but it goes both way. And with that I called my Lord Commandant on his comm link. Alexander? Are you there? I asked, unsure if I called the right guy. Yes, my lord. I'm here. A manly voice came back. Good. Call the council and tell them I will meet them in the meeting room in 30 minutes. They should all be here after the party, no? I said. Oh yes. Right away, my lord. He responded and I closed the comm link. That's when I began thinking to myself. Why was he so startled? It shouldn't be out of the ordinary for me to call him like that. And with that I continued to grumble about it until I realized 5 minutes later. Of course. Am I stupid of something? My father died 24 hours ago and I've been in my room since. I guess I need to act a little bit sad. And with that I did the trick where you got yourself to cry by pressing a certain spot in your eyes. After 15 minutes it looked like I had cried my eyes out but had stopped some time ago. Great. And with that I quickly got my clothes on before I left my room. I was outfitted in a white shirt and white pants. House Veridian was known for their white clothes and hair. The corridor was quite magnificent. It was larger than any ship corridors but not too large, quite similar to Naboo but not the same height. The walls were light brown but with white flags hanging down all around me. Pictures were also put on the walls. Outside my room stood 2 guards. They were actually extremely fucking cool. Their helmets was similar to that of the British Royal Guard, more precisely the white hair extension coming from the top of their head. They had metal helmets similar to ancient knights. They had a white cape coming down from their shoulders. They carried a short blade on their left chest and another in a horizontal line across their back belt. They had an A310 rifle that they carried and AA-180 blaster pistol in their holster. They had Durasteel chest, arm, and shoulder armor. They had white wraps and thin armor around their stomach and waist. Lastly, they had Durasteel foot armor. There was 2 uniforms, one for officers and one for soldiers. This was for the Royal Guard. Image insert of both. However, I didn't have any officers with me currently. They were too busy hunting down the potential attackers. Once I stepped out, I nodded to both of them before walking on, as I usually did. And they both followed me wordlessly. After 8 minutes of walking through the large corridors, I reached the main hall, where my usual seat was situated, similar to a throne. However, we continued on and behind the main hall and into a small room. Outside there already stood 4 guards. The corridors were large and the corridor had 2 entrances. 2 guards at each entrance, and lastly my 2 guards stationed themselves at the door to the room, once I entered. When I entered there were already 6 people there waiting, whom all stood up when I entered. "Please sit, we have a lot to discuss," I said as I sat down at the main chair. I could feel a lot of stares from the 6 individuals but I ignored it. Firstly, Count Thalron. "I wish to offer my condolences," a man in his 60-foot AS said. "Thank you, Prime Minister Jason. But let's not dwell in the past and look forward," I said as those who wanted to offer it didn't. Firstly, Lord Commandant Alexander. "How is the search for the potential terrorist going?" I asked and he stood up. "My lord, military intelligence suggests that there could be multiple factors. Both Bacta corporations had a motive, alongside the native species. However, it could also be a plot from your enemy government. The Trade Federation has been heated for some time," he said before sitting down. "I see. Order the military intelligence to focus all their manpower on this situation. Admiral Jamie, order 4 CR-90s and 2 escort squadrons to prepare for departure. Meanwhile, order all other forces to be on guard," I said as I turned to Jamie, the chief of our navy, even though it was small. That was when someone stood up abruptly. "My lord, you can't possibly think of traveling now?" Prime Minister Jason exclaimed. "Yes, I do," I simply said without explaining myself. "Why? Your safety is imperative as you are the only heir to the Veridian family. Additionally, the recent assassination puts you in danger," he argued. "Prime Minister, this attack is made out of jealousy. The Trade Federation because they want our business, either Bacta corporations because they want full control, other planets are jealous of our prosperity. We only recently joined the Republic but we already have major political influence. And the reason they did all of this is quite simple," I said, deciding to give them a cliffhanger. "Which is?" the ever-impatient Prime Minister asked. "Our military strength," I said as 2 eyes began to shine. "You can say what you want but our military is completely and utterly weak compared to our economy. We are slowly becoming equal to core worlds, which they don't like. But we only have 1/8 of even the weakest core world military. Even the police force of most core worlds are stronger than our military," I said as 2 eyes began shining even more. "Our infantry is bad, but the navy is even worse. Which is why I am traveling to Cato Neimoidia to improve it," I said. That's when one guy couldn't keep his excitement and stood up even though the Prime Minister already stood. Usually only one could stand to speak at a time. And that was Naval Admiral Jamie. "My lord, what naval craft do you plan to buy?" he asked with excitement. "You are going to buy 15 Cumulus-class Corsair ships on Corellia and 150 Z-95 headhunters for a total of 12 million credits. Meanwhile, I will travel to Cato Neimoidia and attempt to buy Munificent-class Star frigate. I don't know if the Trade Federation will sell though," I said, and after I finished both of them sat down. And with that I turned to the general. "General Tier, the military will not have as large of a recruitment spree but instead I wish to focus on training them. I want you to increase the Royal Guards to 5,000 within 2 years alongside Alexander. Ask me for funds and I will get you them, anything. Additionally, you will train 5,000 elite Marines with the ability to board enemy naval vessels. And increase our main forces to 50,000, Admiral Jamie. Train additional Navy officers for future crafts. Train 10,000 of them. I suggest you get your second in command on it. If you need funds then ask me," I said. And he immediately stood up, saluted me and said, "Yes, my lord. Consider it done," before sitting down again. That's when I turned to the 5th guy in the room. "Harry, you will be given 3 billion credits. Your goal is to get an additional 40 million Vraxti to work directly under me to produce Bacta. You have 1 year on you. You can choose how to approach. Forcefully inducting them, luring them in with cash." "I don't care," I said. He simply nodded without standing up. Not that I cared. Many might call me cruel but this is how the world is. Aliens are hated on, even those with extra ears or color. But these guys outright looked like insects. Not even other species considered them equal. That's when I turned to the sixth and last guy. The Chief of Security. Axel, for every 100 Vrasdi, recruit 1 enforcer, and make sure they receive heavy stun guns with live ammo. If you need help, don't hesitate calling in the army. Additionally, make sure we have 80,000 police officers. We can't have civil stress at this critical time. There are big powers moving. And we need to be prepared. You have 500 million credits. And with that I stood up, ending the meeting. And I quickly walked towards the CR-90. They had already been prepped alongside a squadron of Z-95 hunters. The meeting actually took around 30 minutes and not the short amount it seemed like. Chapter 2, Hyperspace. After leaving the room, Alexander followed me. Although I called him my assistant, the Lord Commandant of the Royal Guard is that. Now then, although my decision was quick and decisive, it truly was the best choice. The Munificent-class frigate was an extremely solid ship. 3 Munificent-class frigates could easily engage 2 Venators in pure firepower. If they were a main carrier and had a Jedi, then 5 to 1 seems more likely. 1 Munificent outgunned 1 Venator, but a Venator was a carrier through and through. And that's why I believe Munificent got so much hate. However, a Munificent ship costs 12 million while a Venator costs 59 million and Republic doesn't sell. Although it will probably cost 3 to 5 million to replace some stuff so it can be run by men and not droids, it's still so much cheaper and it's the perfect heavy patrol vehicle. However, to get it I am probably going to have to give away a bit of political power. Probably assisting them in 1 to 2 votes. Well, no matter. When I left the room, the 6 guards plus Alexander followed me. He walked on my right while they formed up with 2 forward, 2 behind and 1 on each side. My lord, if I may? Alexander asked. Alexander was an extremely loyal man whom we saved from his orphanage at a young age. My father often did that. We have like 3 men training similarly to Alexander. Yes, Alexander? I asked, but I continued to stare ahead. May I ask, why did you have to go with such haste? Why not wait a few days and let manage your loss of a family decrease? He asked with true worry in his voice. That was originally my plan, however. The more I was alone, the more I began thinking. Who would do this? Why? And the answers became worse and worse. Nobody would assassinate for no reason, especially by not finishing the job. I could have been an easy target, but they didn't even try. So they most certainly wanted to weaken us. But why? Well, I think it's because they want to war us. I said seriously. What? But the Republic would never stand for it. We are their main Bacta seller. He exclaimed with surprise. No, the Bacta cartels sell it to the Republic. Let's say a planet was paid by the Bacta cartels to attack us then leave. If that takes less than a year, then the Republic wouldn't care. They have become too corrupt. I said. And like that Alexander entered a deep state of thoughts. But who would attack us? He asked cautiously. I don't know for certain. It is probably not Fonder because they make 3 times as much as us without stressing. Ariadu and the Tarkin family could certainly do it due to their outer security force. Sullus too has been extremely suspicious lately, mainly due to Bacta and political differences. I said as Alexander thought again. If it is the Tarkin family, then we are thoroughly screwed. He said with a slight tremble. I agree. Even with our reforms, we wouldn't make a dent. They have hundreds of frigates and corvettes. However, I believe it to be Bestine. They have a decently large navy due to their previous shipyards. They have been in decline due to the Republic and Tarkin using them to host their fleets and demand food. And as such they would become desperate. I said with the maturity of someone 10 years older than I am. I see. I will make sure to up security. Alexander said. Just in time for us to enter the large hangar where 4 CR-90 corvettes stood, and 18 Z-95 headhunters. There also stood 400 Royal Guards. 100 on each ship. 3 corvettes for me and 1 for the Prime Minister. I would also have a Z-95 headhunter escort, which would be 12, while the Prime Minister got a half, so 6. After enjoying the sight of our mediocre defenses, I walked forward and entered my main CR-90, called the Swift Wind. This was due to its immense speed being equipped with a Tier 1 hyperdrive and Tier 5 backup. Additionally, it removed almost all cargo space. It was therefore just a bit slower than the Z-95 headhunters. The CR-90, while large and made to be somewhat comfortable, was much smaller than the Palace, especially the corridors. However, the plus side was that it was quite small, so I could walk through the entire thing in 2 minutes. I turned to Alexander. Let's get out of here as soon as possible. I'll be in my room. I said before walking off. The CR-90 truly was a planetary defense fleet diamond. While not the strongest cannons, once you refitted them to be made to fight capital ships by removing its starfighter weapons, it could be dangerous. Sure, 6 of them couldn't even scratch a Venator, even less a Star Destroyer. But they could fight some cruisers equally. And with that, I headed towards my quarters. My quarters were situated at the top of the ship, in the middle of the dual turbolasers and 4 single turbolasers, just above the diplomatic meeting room. The room was luxurious and meant for high-profile members. It was situated centrally, with extra shields and safety. Luckily for me, the entrance tube was like 30 seconds away from the midship elevator, which would take me to my room. The 2 guards from my quarters in the palace followed me as I went into the tube. It could only carry a max of 6 people at a time. The 4 other guards would come with the next tube. The tubes in Star Wars were truly advanced. There weren't any buttons or any of that stuff. My guard pressed something on his hand control and we began traveling upwards. Much faster than any elevator on Earth, but you weren't flying. When we arrived, there was a small corridor leading to 2 rooms. The corridor had a blue carpet running down the entire length of the corridor and it had white walls, like the rest of the ship, but the blue carpet was exquisite. My room was the one furthest away. Meanwhile, the second was for any other guests that would want to come. Entering my room, I found myself in a usual Star Wars luxury studio. There were 2 rooms. The closest one was situated with my desk in the corner, a table, and a sofa going halfway around the table. Meanwhile, the other included my bed, a clothing closet, and a mirror. Notify me when we depart, I told the guard as I entered. They formed up in a guard position outside my door. I went straight to my desk and I sat down. Opening the screen, I began looking at our specialties. The Veridian family had long had a tradition of combat, especially sword fighting. Before we colonized Thyferra, we were a famous mercenary group having fought both the Jedi, Sith, and Mandalorian. We specialize in the use of vibroblades. Our troops were usually outfitted with the Nadin vibrosword type. Each has 1 short and 1 long blade. Additionally, the Veridian family had an ancient sword. It was a white Nadin vibrosword, however it was special. The handle was made from pure Beskar. It also had lightning properties, allowing it to send short bursts of electricity down its blade, electrifying anyone touching it. Our entire military focused on quality over quantity. My royal guards were each capable of fighting against commando droids, and even some could fight against Magna droids. Alexander could probably fight a Jedi Knight or Jedi Master. That's how good he was. That's when I remembered something. My father was the old senator. Now that he is dead, I must choose another. I could assign someone else the position. But I don't quite trust another with that power, at least not yet. So I will make myself a senator. That's when one of the guards knocked on the door. Come in, I said as I continued to look over our armor. It was quite amazing. Count Thalron. Word just came from Lord Commandant Alexander. We have departed from the royal hangar, he said as he stood at attention. Very good. Tell Alexander to make a stop at Coruscant along the way, I said as I signaled for him to leave. That's when I entered the Royal Guard Regiment Information tab. At least that is what it is currently. It is led by Lord Commandant Alexander. He is assisted by Commander Luke. He also had 3 captains, each leading a battalion. The 1st battalion is known as the Royal Commandos, exactly like the Senate Commandos. The 2nd and 3rd battalions are known as the Royal Infantry, serving as the main force. Meanwhile, the last is the Royal Protectorate, my guards. Each battalion currently has 250 men serving in each of them. The 2 men standing outside guarding me are called Rob and John. They are 2 of the most promising and elite guards we have. They're both 23 years old but already on the level of the captains. Meanwhile, the 38,000 soldiers of the main army and navy wear the same armor as the guards but without the hair on top, capes or swords, and their armor is cheaper, but it looks the same. I then began searching deep into my memories regarding our political position. Both cartels already have a position in the Senate. They are shadow supporters of Palpatine, the reason they got Thyferra for themselves after the Empire. We have been struggling with political relationships, especially with those close to us. We have a very good relationship with Corellia, mainly because we send back to there for ship testing. We have good relationships with Hapes, but they have little to no military might and a decent economy, but they can't help us. Corellia might, but if the cartels still sell them back to for them to stay out, they will. Our most suitable ally would be Tanub. We have great relations. We buy our required agricultural products from them at a discount price, and in return we sell them back to directly. Both of our planets have worked closely to maintain this relationship. Tanub, however, does have some internal problems, mainly related to their 980 million humans, and therefore a lot of criminality and gang violence. The Tanub has a strong military force but little to no naval force. Though they sell food to feed billions in the mid and outer rim, food doesn't sell that well and they only make around 15 billion credits, the majority due to their population. However, they spend a galactic 14 billion credits purely on maintaining cities and health. Another 1 billion, so only around 1 billion for their army of 120,000 men. They don't have good equipment though, and they are the straight opposite of our focus, quality with their focus on quantity. However, our alliance with Tanub is a great political threat. We control the food supply of most of the mid-rim and the entirety of the Bacta industry. Lastly, we have good relations with the Peace Faction, Alderaan, Naboo, Mandalore, Mon Calamari and others. We had good relations with the Tarkin family and Ariadu, but nothing good like reductions on price or military protection. Additionally, Ariadu had a large fleet and military relations throughout their system and sector. Tibrin, Malastare, Sullust, Vondark. However, luckily for me, Tarkin hadn't allied themselves with Yag Tul, an important planet in the middle of 4 hyperspace lines. They were peaceful mathematicians and therefore didn't align with Tarkin. I hope they will join me. That's when I felt a tug and the ship entered hyperspace. My desk had a small screen showing our ship on the map. Chapter 3, Coruscant. Coruscant, the capital of the Galactic Republic, the jewel of the core world, the seat of the Jedi Order, the house of the Senators, and the city-wide planet, one of the largest number of inhabitants, and the seat of true power within the galaxy. The Galactic Republic, the Sith Order, the Jedi Order, the Galactic Empire, the New Republic, the Resistance, and the First Order. Every single one of these had its capital or main base on Coruscant. Those who control Coruscant control the galaxy is a way of saying it. It truly was a sight to behold, with thousands of lights, and tens of thousands of ships flying out and in. And when we arrived at the surface of the planet, we would see even more of them. I was standing in the cockpit of the Swift Wind. Beside me sat the 4 pilots steering the ship. At the entrance stood 6 guards. 3 inside the cockpit doors and 3 outside. The 3 inside formed up on the wall with 2 on either side of the door and 1 in the middle. The one in the middle was outfitted with the officer armor, while the 2 others had normal ones. The same happened outside the doors. Their A-130 rifle is positioned in their right hand going upwards and laying on their shoulder. A proper formal position that the British Royal Guard used as well. Turning towards the main pilot I said, "Land on the Senate building, wait until we're authorized." I then turned to Alexander. "Did you notify Chancellor Valorum of our arrival?" I asked and he immediately answered, "Aye. He should be awaiting you, my lord." "Very good," I said as I turned back to Coruscant. Around the planet, there stood 75 consular-class cruiser. A testament to their security, even though the Republic doesn't have any standing army. However, Coruscant itself has 100 consular-class cruisers as their planetary defense force. Though they were associated with the judicial forces, they weren't technically a part of it. CR-90 Corvette cruiser. Please identify yourself. A voice came over the comms as 3 consular cruisers approached us. I guess our squadron's heavy armament would require an inspection. This is CR-90 Corvette 37623 of the Thyferra government. We are transporting Count Thalron Veridian. We have a meeting with Chancellor Valorum. Alexander spoke up as the voice on the other side went quiet. Your meeting has been confirmed. You may proceed, Corvette 37623. He said as the 3 consulars traveled back to their formation. All right, hurry up. Let's not keep the Chancellor waiting, I said as we began flying into Coruscant. Coruscant had extremely strict laws requiring you to fly within the air lanes throughout Coruscant. But there were a few exceptions, namely military officials, policemen, senators, and Jedi. There were probably many more, but those are all the important ones. And as such our 3 CR-90 and 12 Z-95 headhunters approached the Senate building. Once we approached, I saw multiple land station cannons start up and Senate guards entered their fighters, prepared to engage us if we did anything. Additionally, a unit of 50 Senate guards came out onto the hangar we landed on. The hangar only had space for a few of us, so we split up. Each corvette went to each of our assigned hangar and we had 4 Z-95 headhunters landing with each of the teams. All right. Have 25 of our best men join us. Rest will stay on the ship. The guards on the other corvettes will remain stationary. We won't be here for long, I said as I began exiting the cockpit. I guess he expected that exact placement as he simply nodded to the officer inside the cockpit and pressed a button on his comms. No speaking or anything. As I exited the cockpit, 5 of them followed me while Alexander and the officer headed ahead. I spent more than enough time walking through the corvette at a slow speed. It took a total of 4 minutes due to me being slow, giving Alexander more than enough time to organize the men. When I arrived at the exit tube, a guard informed me all 20 men were already stationed outside. Entering the tube with the 5 guys all at once, it slowly began going down. I had 3 guards in front of me and 2 guards behind. However, at some point, they had removed their A-130 blaster rifles and now stood there with their hands on their vibrosword, which was connected to their belt and went down, like ancient knights. I guess Alexander had ordered this due to the fact it was mainly ceremonial. Plus the corridors of the Senate are much easier for them to fight with swords and pistols than with rifles. That's when we reached the ground, or the bottom of the elevator. In front of us stood the door we entered through. It was a small door, only taking perhaps 3 at a time, but it was more than enough. 2 of the 3 guards in front exited first and formed up on the small ramp going down from the entrance. I then entered with the officer in front and the 2 guards behind me. It was quite the sight that greeted me. On both sides of me stood 9 of my royal guards in a straight line, going 4 meters until it stopped. At the end stood Alexander and 2 guard officers in the middle, facing the Senate. However, in front of them was the true spectacle. 40 Senate guards stood in double columns, 20 on each side, 10 men in length and 2 in width, forming the entire way to the hangar entrance, which truly only was 10 meters away. However, 2 meters away from Alexander stood a lot of important people. Supreme Chancellor Valorum, Vice Chancellor Mos Amidus, Naboo Senator Palpatine, Leader of the Peace faction, Bail Antilles, Leader of the Core World faction, Ainley Team, Leader of the Rim faction, and lastly Voatel, Leader of the War faction. It truly was a large meeting. All the head figures of the Senate parties were here. Not that it was quite shocking. I am only 14 years old, my father recently died, and we control the entirety of the Bacta produce. We are also friends with the main food supplier. Any of the 4 powers gaining my membership would immediately gain a lot of political power. And slowly we began approaching. We walked faster than before, but not fast walking. And as we reached Alexander and his party, They stepped away as we walked through. Alexander and the officer following me through the ship positioned themselves at my right and left shoulder while the other 4 guys formed a line behind us. "Greetings, Your Majesty," I said as I did an elegant bow. "Greetings, Count Thalron. You have my condolences for the terrible assassination done on your father. If you ever need my help in finding the perpetrator, I will gladly do anything in my power," he said as I stood up straight. "Thank you, Your Excellency. It means a lot," I said with a smile, which he returned wholeheartedly. This guy wasn't even close to how they pointed him out to be in the movies. "Well, shall we move on? We could discuss more in depth at my office," he said, and I nodded. We then began walking towards his office. While we were walking towards his office, I got multiple condolences from different people. I also had 10 of my guards follow me. Meanwhile, most of the Senate guards dispersed as only 15 followed the Chancellor. And soon enough we arrived at his office. The Supreme Chancellor sat down in his chair, and I sat opposite from him. The Vice-Chancellor stood behind him and the other 4 senators stood around. "Well, Count Thalron, what is the reason for your visit? Not that we don't enjoy your company, but I doubt you traveled this far right after an assassination for nothing," he said while looking at me with a slight pity. "No, you are correct, Your Grace. I am here for a reason. I wish to follow my house's tradition and name myself the Senator of Thyferra," I said, shocking absolutely nobody. "Yes, that shall be done. I'll have you appointed a senator in 3 days. Also, due to your special circumstances as Count and Senator, you will have a representative to represent you in votes if you are not there," he spoke. "Very good. I'll get you the name of my representative soon," I said with a smile. "Will that be all, Count Thalron?" Valorum asked, and I nodded, signaling the end of the meeting. Soon enough we all began departing. I saw multiple of the faction leaders wanting to approach me, but I decided to get ahead of them and approached Palpatine. "Senator Palpatine," I said as I approached him. "Ah, young Thalron. What can I do for you?" he asked in his usual grandfather tone. Though I can't lie, it's quite effective. I would want to befriend him if I didn't know that he's a dark Sith. I would ask for 2 favors, and in return, I shall join your faction," I said, being straightforward. "Oh, and what would those 2 favors be?" he asked while slightly looking around. Shocked that I would ask him that in front of all these senators. Well, I hope he thinks I'm just stupid in regards to Senate and stuff. I also looked around slightly without even anyone noticing it. Every single one of the other 3 senators was listening. So, I decided to speak a little bit loud. Loud enough for them to hear. "So, I am sure you have noticed, but my father was assassinated. And through that, I got a wake-up call. The back-to-business is flourishing like never before. And that assassination was a test. Someone wants that business for themselves. And I realized we can't defend ourselves. Our military was enough for us 100 years ago, but not anymore. I know that the peace faction wants no military fights, but I also know that you understand the dire consequences and potential war if someone were to take over Thyferra and monopolize the Bacta," I said as Palpatine began thinking, probably trying to predict what ship I want. "I also know the peace faction is large and focuses on political and diplomatic influence. So I was wondering if you could get the Trade Federation to sell the cheap Munificent-class star frigate. I would also suggest you hurry, as I am likely to join whichever faction that gets me the best offer," I said, putting extra weight and voice on that. Though I would prefer the peace faction due to many of its members' proximity to me, I don't have a choice. Lastly, I need a sufficient bomber. I have been eyeing the Skurg H-6 bomber which your Nubian Design Collective offered to make for you. If you could get that or any other quality bomber, I would gladly join yours. However, again, if I find something else that someone other faction can give me, then I am likely to go towards their side," I said as I finished, letting Palpatine speak. "I don't have many contacts in the Trade Federation, but some of my fellow senators do, and as such I shall work hard to get you them. Regarding the Skurg H-6 bomber, I will make sure you get it. I shall also manage to put the price down from 150,000 to 100,000 credits," he said with a smile plastered on his face. He probably thought something along the lines of, "I just have to threaten Newt Gunray and I get an extremely powerful ally who can do what the Queen of Naboo will if that operation fails. He will also be a major boost to my allies as I can get them cheap Bacta." "Thank you, Senator Palpatine," I said as I walked away, followed by my guards. Through the formation I managed to see multiple of the senators contacting their assistants and running off. My plan worked. With this, not only did I secure some from Newt Gunray, but I also put major political pressure on them. They will probably help me customize it and put down the price. "If I'm lucky," I said with a smile as I walked off. Soon enough I reached my Corvette, and I immediately went to the cockpit. An hour had gone since I left and they had already filled the ship with fuel and food. Pays off to have hundreds of guards who can help. I approached the pilot and spoke. "Set the course for Cato Neimoidia." Chapter 4. Cato Neimoidia. The ice planet of Cato Neimoidia. The Star Wars copy of the Alps. The entire planet is like the Alps. The true dream for any skier. It had taken us 3 days to reach Cato Neimoidia. If we traveled through one major hyperspace lane the entire time, it would have taken 2 days tops. However, Sadly, Cato Neimoidia doesn't have large hyperspace lanes going through it. We had switched between 5 hyperspace lanes to reach Cato Neimoidia, an annoying and time-consuming flight. But soon enough Cato Neimoidia came within sight. It was a magnificent blue planet. It had multiple gray dots, signaling mountains, but also grasslands. However, the majority of it was blue oceans with white clouds. But something else caught my attention. Something called Looker-Hulk-class battleship. 10 of them, being stationed at the only entrance to the system, the hyperlanes. Although they were called battleships, they seemed more similar to a large space station. However, the special parts of Cato Neimoidia remained in between these mountains. Large cities were connected by 2 mountains. They were called the bridge cities. However, they looked much more like large hammocks with a city on them. That's when we got a transmission coming through the swift wind. "This is the Cato Neimoidia Defensive Fleet. Please identify yourself." A voice came over the comms. "This is CR-90 Corvette 37623 of the Thyferra fleet. Follow me as an escort of 2 corvettes and 12 Z-95 headhunters. We are here on a business meeting with the Trade Federation." The pilot said into the comms. "Hold your position while we authenticate your ship and meeting." A voice came back, and immediately after we all stopped. 3 minutes later the same voice returned. "You have been granted access. You will be met at the Nexarum Prime, the capital of Cato Neimoidia." The voice sounded and the pilot quickly restarted our previous path, and we picked up speed. Once we reached the atmosphere, we spent a lot of time navigating through the mountains and cities. Nexarum Prime was not situated at the top of the planet, and you therefore needed to travel a bit even after exiting hyperspace. However, we weren't just allowed to travel with a small-sized task force. We had a starfighter escort of 30 vulture droids. And soon enough we came within sight of the capital city. It was completely stunning. Before the Trade Federation, the locals weren't unified and fought for economic dominance on Cato Neimoidia. To showcase wealth they built these cities. And this was the largest I've seen. It wasn't held on by 2 mountains. No, there were 4 mountains, perfectly aligning themselves to create a square. And between hang a large city, it looked like 2 mountain cities simply crossed over each other, but the middle was combined. "CR-90 Corvette 37623. Please head towards the palace landing platform. Deputy Viceroy Hathmon Char will be waiting for you. The rest of your escort will be required to land on hangar 1032 and 1031. A robot droid said. I suspect that it was one of the vulture droids escorting us. "Understood," my pilot said as he fled down for a landing at the big platform. "All right. Alexander. Same procedure as last time, but have 5 guards follow me," I said as I turned around and left the cockpit. However, this time only 2 royal guards stood there, John and Rob. They followed me as I headed to my quarters. I had some information to retrieve. It took us 2 minutes to reach it, the everlasting bonus of a small ship. Once I arrived, I picked up a datapad. It included multiple things I wanted my ships to be manufactured with. Equipped with my trusted datapad, I exited my room and went towards the exit tube. It was situated right beside my room, and as such it took barely a minute to reach it. When I exited the Corvette, a sight I've seen before greeted me. Mainly my guards' formation. They had formed up the same as on Coruscant, in 2 lines surrounding me. At the edge stood Alexander with 2 guards. 3 meters away from Alexander and the end of the formation stood the 3 representatives from the Trade Federation. However, I only recognized 2 of them. Newt Gunray. He stood behind the right shoulder of some other Neimoidian. Meanwhile, Lot Dodd stood behind the unknown guy on his right. The usual happened as I walked through our formation and Alexander stepped to the side. Newt Gunray and his fellow had 4 B-1 battle droid guards. However, there were 50 others spaced around the hangar. And probably thousands through the palace I was looking at. That's when I confronted the 2 men in front of me. "Greetings, I am Count Thalron Veridian, of House Veridian, ruler and Senator of Thyferra," I said with a smile as I kept my hands behind my back. The unknown guy spoke up. "I am Hathmon Char, Deputy Viceroy of the Trade Federation. Sadly the Viceroy couldn't be here due to business at Scipio. Behind me is Senator Lot Dodd, representing us in the Senate, and Governor Newt Gunray of Cato Neimoidia," he said as he smiled. However, it became one of those disgusting ones due to his species. I see, the luck truly isn't on my side. Not being allowed to witness the famous Viceroy. But no matter. Each of you has your own excellent reputation. I am sorry I came here without notifying you. But I would hope some of my Senate colleagues notified you for me," I said, trying to please their pride and arrogance. "Ah, truly you have a way with your words. And yes, you are correct, Count. Every single one of the 4 Senate powers has notified us, bringing wishes, terms, demands, and even payments in return for our cooperation with you." This time Lot Dodd said in his usual deep and ugly voice. "I see. Well, shall we discuss it further inside?" I said, trying to move our discussion inside, where I could properly begin the dealings. Yes. We better get inside," Newt Gunray said as all 4 of us began walking. The 9 guards followed behind us. The walk through the palace was eventful. There were servants from across the galaxy. From Twi'lek to Togruta to Mon Calamari. The corridors were gigantic. I couldn't even reach the floor even if I placed 10 of me on top of each other at some places. Once we entered, we got refreshments as we headed to the office. If my memory is correct, the design was indeed quite like Lot Dot's palace, which is shown in the Clone Wars series. And soon enough we arrived. His office was quite similar to that of the Chancellor, with one large chair, then a desk and 3 chairs on the other side of the desk. However, there was also a table with 6 chairs around it. It was a circular table. And that's where we headed. The 3 Neimoidians sat across from me, and they opened the hologram situated in the middle of the table. "Let's begin," Lot Dot said as he showed us the munificent. Holy shit. This was entirely different from what I assumed. It included 20 light turbolasers, 2 ion cannons, 2 gigantic long-range turbolasers, and 20-point defense cannons. But that was it. It missed close to 40 medium-range double turbolasers, 20-point defense cannons, and 12 heavy flak cannons. It also had extremely weak defensive shields, opposite to that of the future munificent-class frigates. This here costs 8 million to build. However, it has no space for humans. And that is mainly what we must discuss. After looking through the munificent, we have confirmed that it would require 2,000 men to crew it at optimal performance. We will have to reform approximately 15% of the cargo space to make it possible for 2,000 humans to live here. After reforms, approximately 5,000 can live there comfortably. Lot Dot said, signaling for me to continue. I see. Well, I will be paying a lot more than 8 million credits, but in return, I would need help customizing it. Firstly, I want to remove about 75% of the cargo hold, 25% to go to living quarters. Then create a hangar for transportation ships and 2 squadrons. After looking at the cargo bay, these 2 should take approximately 45% of the cargo hold. I also want to include more defensive and offensive formations, and therefore we need to transfer 10% to power and laser holdings. I also need to remove 10% to create large and powerful deflector shields, the best you can manage. And lastly, I want to use the last 10% to create a vehicle space for speeders and tanks. I said as I waited for their response. I see. Well, most of that can easily be done by us as we create them. The banking clan also often requires ships of similar stuff. We would usually charge a lot more for it, but we won't. But you need to pay for all parts and the worker's salary. Lastly, we need you to name the gun emplacements that you require and that you pay for them. The Deputy Viceroy spoke while stroking his chin. Yes, that is more than acceptable. Well, I will require the placement of 13D DBY, 827 heavy turbolasers on starboard and port side at the same level as the heavy forward dual turbolasers, 26 medium double turbolasers under the forward hull, 12 heavy flak cannons, and lastly 20 extra point defense cannons. And by the way, I wish to buy 4 of them. I said as I looked at my datapad. Each would cost a total of 16 million credits. 4 million more than that of the CIS modified one. However, this one had superior firepower to that of the CIS. However, it also had a lot of space modifications and shields that cost a lot of credits as well. All 3 of them went silent as each of them focused on their datapad. They were checking out every part with their shipwrights, other companies who sell the parts, etc. Newt Gunray was the first to speak. Our approximate cost to build one would be 15.800.000 credits. Newt Gunray spoke. He truly was a genius in the area of trade. Yes, my conclusions are the same. The cost will be about 15 to 16 million credits. However, that's without the vehicles and fighters, which may cost a bit. Either way, it will take approximately 2 months to build 4 of these. It would usually take 2 weeks to a month to produce it due to our skills in mass productions. But we need to test and build new blueprints. It will therefore take 2 months. The Viceroy spoke. That's when Newt Gunray spoke again, having finished another round of research. For both Munificent-class frigate, it will cost 65 million to build the ship, 800,000 credits in individual pay, work vehicles, and testing. And lastly, it will cost 1 million to come up with the blueprints. However, this is an over-assumption. It will be more than enough to refix if we make any error in our short calculation. If we don't use it all by the time it is finished, then we will return the remaining funds to you alongside the ships. We will also notify you when we begin testing or finalizing, so you can send a Naval crew. We'll have someone teach them the basics. He continued as he put down his datapad. Very well. I shall have it transferred immediately. I said as I picked up my datapad. They were truly useful. I simply went to the intergalactic banking app and sent a deposit to the Trade Federation. The banking clan made it easy for any large customer to send money over by the press of a button, though it required your personal code. After sending the money over, I showed it to the Deputy Viceroy. Great. My datapad has also confirmed the transaction. Pleasure doing business with you. He said as he stood up. I did as well. And we shook hands. As fast as possible, I turned around and walked out. When I exited, I realized none of the other 3 guys followed, so I assumed they had a meeting. As I exited, I sent a nod to Alexander before we all began walking out. We walked at a fast pace. Not quite walk jogging, which was a sport, but faster than a normal walk. I honestly just wanted to get out of here and get my ass back to Thyferra. I simply hurried over here because I knew that the longer I had a ship, the more efficient my men were at using it. Soon enough I reached my Corvette. As the tube was taking me into the Corvette, I turned on my comms. Pilot. Notify the other corvettes to depart from their hangars and meet us in space. Once we're all regrouped, head back to Thyferra. I voiced over the comms. As I finished, I cut the line and turned to Alexander. Make sure the guys get some training in. They've been resting too much. John and Rob, follow me to the formal conference chamber. I'll talk with Admiral Jason. I said as I began walking towards the midship elevator. I only needed to take the elevator one floor up. Sadly, there weren't stairs in this ship. At least not between the 4 or something floors. After 30 seconds, I reached the conference room. John and Rob stationed themselves outside as usual as I went to my head chair and sat down. I pressed a few buttons and the image of Admiral Jason flared up. But I'm pretty sure that isn't a CR-90 Corvette he is standing in. Chapter 5. Improving the Economy. Greetings, Admiral Jason. I said as I looked at his hollow projection. My lord. He replied. What is the progress? Did you get the Corsairs? I asked. Halfway, my lord. It seems Lieutenant Governor Tarkin of Ariadu has been increasing the Outer Fleet's force. Therefore, the Corellian engineers cannot supply us with the full amount of Cumulus-class Corsairs. A total of 10 Corsairs is the max they can supply us. Then they need to change to the Outer Fleet's upgrades. The Cumulus-class Corsairs also cost 3,450,000 Republic credits, a total of 34,500,000. Jason said. I took out my datapad and began doing some mathematics. It would cost 65 million for the 4 munificents, 34,500,000 credits for the Corsairs. That's a total of 99,500,000 credits. And if we count in the additional 150 95 headhunters, that's 12 million credits. 111,500,000 credits. That is a bit over 20% of my military budget. We have a total of 1,500,000,000 credits. Tay will probably need 500,000 with his expansion. Jamie probably needs 500,000 too, so I can spend 500,000 freely. 3 billion went to Harry and Axel got a total of 1 billion. I turned my focus back to Admiral Jason. That is fine. However, I will require a few more ships. Make sure we get an additional 25 DP-20 frigates. They should each cost 4.8 million credits, so a total of 120 million credits. I said as I put my datapad down. Yes, my lord. I'll make sure it is done. He replied as he awaited my signal to leave. However, make sure you haggle as much as humanly possible. Every credit matters. I said before signaling for him to leave. I have now spent 231,500,000 on new naval ships. This was bad. We basically used up half our naval budget. And I wanted to begin building by a new ship. Criffing Bacta companies. They sell the Bacta for 10 times what we sell to them. Like yes, they do. To fully understand this, let's look at Bacta tanks. The main use of Bacta is to heal. One full Bacta tank costs 5,000 credits. It costs an additional 3,000 credits to refill. Each refill includes 300 liters of Bacta. We sell 300 liters of Bacta for 300 credits. We sell about 9 billion liters to the two companies. 585 million to Zukfra and 315 million to Zoltan. So we sell equivalent of 30 million Bacta tanks each year alone. That's 2,500,000 Bacta tanks every single month, or 750 million credits and liters every single month. If we sold them ourselves for 3,000, we would earn 7,500,000,000, 7.5 billion every single fucking month. That's how bad we're robbed. And that's only with 15 million workers. With the extra 35 million workers, a total of 50 million workers, we would make 30 billion liters of Bacta. Even with 300 credits per unit, that is still 30 fucking billion credits. It just goes to show the pure worth and importance of Bacta. And we won't have any problem selling this. 30 billion liters of Bacta is equal to 100 million units of Bacta. That is 100 million, not enough for even 1% of Coruscant. Much less of the galaxy. Making my final decision, I turned on my comms. We need to get our business straight. If we continue to rely on the fucking Bacta cartels, then we are going to slowly die out. Their immense profit will allow them to hire legit every mercenary in the world and attack us. The longer we let them grow, the bigger risk we are putting ourselves in. But we must do it covertly. There are too many variables. 1. If Zoltan and Zukfra went together, they would demolish us. We would need to remove one before the other can react. And the one to attack is obvious. Zoltan. They rely heavily on trade from other individual Vratics, about 50% of their Bacta. This makes them dangerous. However, luckily they don't own any Vratics or work for them. They simply buy from free ones. Another reason as to why I'm choosing Zoltan is that Zukfra is giving me money. I get a lot from their 25% and therefore I want to get stuff from them as long as I can. But there was also a big risk in. Zoltan Corp has multiple big clients, and when the suppliers disappear, the clients get angry. Especially when those two corporations have representatives in the Senate. However, that is not all of it. The largest reason is described in 3 words. The core corporations. The biggest corporations in every single aspect. Techno-Union, technology. They are the largest technological manufacturers and inventors. From droids, to ships, to buildings, to cybernetic implants. Everything regarding technology building, They own over 30% of it. Even more in the large areas. Mass produce. Trade Federation. The Grand Master of Mass Produce. They own hundreds of thousands of factories and hundreds of hyperlanes/trade runs. Banking clan. Doesn't even need explanation. The without a doubt largest and richest banks in the entire galaxy. Commerce Guild. The galaxy natural harvesting superpower. Mining, agriculture, natural products, they have it. They also own Sorosub, a large ship manufacturer. Corporate Sector Authority. Basically owns a large fucking sector. Second largest to the Hutt. If we don't count the major ones, such as the Republic, Empire, Sith, Rebels. Churka, a pretty unknown business, but they are probably amongst the top 3 in terms of military might, even possibly number 1. And lastly the Bacta cartel. A union amongst Zukfra and Zoltan. They sell Bacta. The only resource that can only be found on one planet. That is also why nobody has attacked us yet. They're afraid that the Bacta cartel will call in assistance from the core corporations. The true threat that those corporations can become is actually crazy. Just look at the Confederacy of Independent Systems. If Palpatine wasn't such a good manipulator and Dooku attempted to loose the war, they would have won easily. The Senate was directly under Dooku and wouldn't resist them. The droids had the Republic outnumbered 3-1 anywhere, and almost 5/6-1 at the end of the war. I don't understand how they lost. Additionally, they had so many more naval ships. Lookerhulks, Recusants, Munificents and tens of other ships. And that was only supported by half of the core corporations. It's truly a stupid system. The Senate should have never allowed these corporations to grow at the exact speed that they are. And the corporations wouldn't, if it weren't for the Senate. It is a reason why we have monopoly laws in most countries on Earth. Entirety of Europe, America, large parts of Asia. They were simply too much of a threat to attack any of them without proper caution. I will need to make relations with the Trade Federation and the Techno Union. Those two are the largest and strongest in terms of military. Additionally, the Techo Union is great with technology. And I needed a game plan. And my current plan was simple. Begin taking over more and more Vratics. I have to enslave them. It's survival of the fittest. And the Vratics have been dealt a bad hand. But truly, serving under me is better than the corporations. Under me they get housing, food and comfort. But the corporations completely abused them. Their population went from 80% and 93 million to 84 million and 76% in a decade. 7 million died in 9 years. That would be like the second largest manslaughter back on Earth. Either way, I needed to make my own connections. Maybe sell to the Trade Federation for 4,000 2,000 respectively, completely crushing their current main supplier Zoltan. I could also sell it cheaper to the Techno Union so they could add them to the ships as part of their starship deals. Simply reducing price and priority by can get me a shit ton of allies and cash at the same time. It truly showed the dangerous effect of the Bacta. And even better was that I was the only suppler. 2 other planets had tried and failed miserably. The only even close to Thyferra were Manaean, and they shut down multiple decades ago. I could gain completely monopoly easily. Too bad none of my predecessors realized it. Monopoly can only be held by a corporation when they own a source of the product, or buy from multiple sources, so one can simply cut them out. That's what Zoltan and Zukfra doesn't have. Both of them are reliant on me. My father ceased Zoltan's single monopoly by simply saying so. And I believe the cartel has begun to look down on us and underestimate us. But it's time to strike. And when they realize they have been attacked, it will be too late. But before that, I needed to do something. Something important for the future. I pressed a button on my forearm comms. Pilot, we have a new destination. Head for Quat. I said without waiting for a response. I had some big plans. And for that I needed money. However, I also needed designers or creators. And I had a few in mind. I would simply hurry their thoughts by pointing out some future things they are about to make. And I will without a doubt get ahead of most other armies. The perk of being a time traveler truly is gigantic. Other complains about not getting a system. Who needs that when you know what happens? Chapter 6. Important information. Chapter 7. Fixed. Chapter 8. Quat drive yards. Quat truly was magnificent. The pure size of their shipyards would amaze anyone. During the Empire they always had multiple ISDs just hanging around. Never doing much, they were simply there to show strength. Signaling the pure terrifying political power and ability that they had. One must never truly underestimate the power of shipbuilding. It is without the doubt the most central and required business. Every single one of their ships are important. Both for civilian use but also for the military. Though Quat drive yards got a huge amount of orders from the Republic and the Empire, further building their own power and prime. But they still continue to build civilian ships. Albeit a bit slower than military, but it shows that even if your main contractors are the 2 biggest powers to ever exist, civilian ships is still a huge market. Either way, as we reached the Quat system we were met by hundreds and hundreds of ships being built, repaired and customized. All from their space rings surrounding Quat. However, immediately after jumping into hyperspace, we were met by 2 Venator-class star destroyers. And we were back to the usual routine of identifying ourselves. However, this time we said we were simply looking around and we were let through. We landed at one of the larger hangar. However, this time we had no welcome party. Not that I really wanted one. I was standing in the cockpit, as I usually was when we met a new planet, and behind me stood Alexander, as he usually did when I wasn't in my chambers. Take 10 guards with you. We're going for a walk, I said, and he nodded. I suppose he expected it, because 10 guards already stood outside the room waiting. I didn't even bother responding, as Alexander knew I appreciated him without relying on my publicly congratulating and complimenting him. Once we exited, I realized something unexpected. Everyone was walking around with guns, but nobody seemed afraid. Usually when people walk around with guns, you're on your top toes ready to dodge behind cover. But here everyone was walking freely. That's when a little blue police droid arrived, similar to the ones on Coruscant. Halt. Customer. I will now read you the rules of the Quat Shipyard 1034. He said as he began yapping. This droid truly was the Sigma Yap Pity Yapper. No fighting, drawing your guns means permanent ban. Should you kill anyone, you will be executed. Do not converse with Quat staff unless allowed to. Do not enter restricted areas. And so on. I think he actually talked for 2 minutes and 23 seconds straight. That will be all, custom. You may move on your way, the droid said before flying away. That was interesting, Alexander said dryly beside me as he shakes his head. I agree. Quite strict protocol. Well, let's move on, I said as I began walking. I entered the walking corridors where hundreds of different men and women were walking. There were hundreds of different species all throughout the shipyard, and it wasn't dominated by any single race. Of course, there were more humans due to the fact we make up the largest amount in a single race. But you didn't really see the difference, as there were more non-humans than humans. And soon enough I stumbled upon an info terminal. They were strategically placed all over the shipyard to help customers navigate through the long and complicated corridors. The info terminal had a filter where you could find areas, specializations, hangars, restaurants, and even customer support. However, it also allowed me to search for specific people. And I typed in Waylex Cantwell Blissex. He was 3 floors above me and 3 sections away. I transferred the directions onto my datapad and began following the instructions. And by blindingly following it, I quickly found myself at the correct place. It was quite deserted. I guess his talent hasn't been recognized yet. Well, that's just great news for me. Too bad for Quat. I pressed the notifier informing Wessex that I was here and looking for him. I sat down at one of the chairs while my men positioned themselves all throughout the waiting area. Not that it was needed with how deserted the waiting area was. And soon enough a middle-aged man barged through the doors. He seemed to be in his late 20s, which was much older than he should be. He looked at me with incredulous eyes. But before I responded, I spotted someone else. It was a girl, no more than 13 years old. She was human, had black hair, blue eyes, and was of medium height of her age. She also held a datapad and looked curiously at me. I looked away from her and focused on the main event. He had light brown hair, a sharp and grumpy face. But it was an excited glint coming through. He was about 185 centimeters in height. I stopped sizing him up and started a conversation. Waylex Cantwell Blissex. I assume. I asked as I stood up. It seems you know my name. But I don't know yours. He asked with a slight smile. My name is Thalron Veridian, Count and Senator of Thyferra, I said as I extended my arm. He was quite shocked. He was about to bow but didn't due to my handshake, which he eventually took. I'm not a man of tricks and plays, so I'll get straight to the point. One of my agents said you were a promising engineer, and I plan on starting up my own starship engineering organization. And I was wondering if you could come and lead it with me? I asked Vang straightforward. The poor man almost stumbled as his brain failed to comprehend with what I just asked. What? Why you want me? Why? And no, how do you know of me? He asked as his brain tried and failed to calm himself. As I said, my agent let me know of your potential. He knew someone you graduated along with and due to your potential kept a close eye. Your potential is being wasted here, which is why I want you and your daughter to come with me. You designed the powerful Venator, but look around. I asked as I waved my arms around to signal the dead waiting room. This took a great toll on the poor man as he looked around, emotions flashing through his face, sadness, anger, disappointment. But eventually he got himself together. Why would I say no? I would be honored to work with you, he said as excitement filled his entire body. Very good. Pack up your stuff and meet me at Hangar 1034. I'll leave 7 guards to help you, I said as I turned around, looked at Alexander before beginning to leave. Alexander understood immediately and he pointed out 7 guards while John and Rob continued to follow me. I decided we needed to hurry, so we went to a nearby speeder station and paid for a 10-minute speeder use. It took us 3 minutes to arrive, so we got a refund after placing the speeder at a new station. We then quickly headed to the Corvette. As we stood in the entrance tube, I gave Alexander a simple command. Send 30 men to their lab to help pack up their stuff. Let's try to be as fast as possible. He nodded just in time for us to enter the main deck. Alexander ran off while me and my 2 loyal guards walked to my chambers. They waited outside as usual while I sat down and began going over a few things. I placed the preemptive drawings of the Alpha 3 Nimbus-class V-Wing starfighters. It was the second fighter Wessex would make, but it was meant to be made a bit later. I also took out a drawing of the Gladiator I Star Destroyer. Another one of Wessex's creation that I would speed up heavily. After doing that, I told Alexander to direct them both up here when they arrived. However, before that, I had another important matter to attend to. I needed an engineering corporations. You couldn't just randomly recruit engineers without pissing of the owners. The Quat drive yards probably didn't care much since Wessex hadn't done anything except the Venator and Etherspray, which he did with a team, whom took most the credit. And I had my eyes on one specific engineering corporation. That was Stellar Tech Solutions. They had recently been going down heavily with no military aircraft within the last 2 years due to lack of good designs. They barely managed to stay afloat by selling civilian ships. I could probably buy it for 200 million. The reason I wanted the Stellar Tech Solutions was partly due to the decent name, but mainly due to the fact they owned an ICM 092792. I could place it in the Thyferra atmosphere and I didn't need to bother with buying space and investing in stuff. However, what was an even bigger boost was the staff was actually quite good at building stuff. They could build a fighter every week from scratch, which was quite good. That basically meant that if I got 5 equal crews to work on 5 different starfighters, I could get 5 in a week. And the staff was a total of 3,000 souls, which was even better. They could probably make tens of starfighters every week, which was honestly a great output of fighters in my opinion. And they would suit me perfectly. Now I only needed set up a meeting with their CEO, which technically shouldn't be that hard, right? I'll probably set it up while we're flying to Thyferra. It's time to finally return home after all the flying around. Personally, there's a lot I want to do home. I hurried way too much due to not thinking as long as I should have. Either way, I had a lot to learn. Pick up my skills with a vibrasword, blasters, jetpacks and piloting. I had minimal training in flying a big ship like a CR-90 Corvette. But I really wanted to learn how to fly a starfighter. It was always cool to watch Anakin take out multiple capital ships with a single starfighter. I mean, he did it at the age of 8. Why can't I when I'm 14? Well, either way, there is a lot I needed to do. I also needed to set up the basics for my own Bacta Corporation, and now an engineering corporation. Work truly never end. That was when my communication device began blinking. It was Alexander. They have arrived, my lord. I directed them towards you and they're now in the elevator. He said. Thank you, Alexander. Set the course for Thyferra. I'll talk a bit with our new guests. I said as I turned off the comlink. Just in time for the doors to open and the duo to step in. A man and a woman. Chapter 9. Stellar Tech Solutions. I sat at my desk as the two approached. And I stood up. Hello again, Waylex, and? I asked, looking at the girl. Lyra Wessex, my lord. She said with a bow and a blush. It was quite adorable, to be honest. Who would believe this young and embarrassed girl would be one of the galaxy's top engineers? No need to be that formal. We're business partners. I replied with a smile, however. Now I wish to know if you already got any designs or ideas? I asked as I signaled for both of them to sit down. There were 2 chairs in the other side of the desk. Yes and no. We have decided to create a starfighter. It's been long since any reliable non-Jedi starfighter has been created. The Z-95 is the closest and it's quite old. Waylex said as he began thinking. Oh, well, you know, I'm not quite the genius at engineering. But when I have some ideas I usually write them up, and I happen to have one if you wish to look at it. Waylex looked at me with dirty eyes. I guess he assumes he will create my design because I said so and take a bunch of credit. Luckily for him, I'm not like that. But I showed him the drawing and his eyes immediately widened. It was the exact copy of the Alpha 3 V-Wing starfighters. This might just work excellent. He said with shock. Lyra also looked intensely. Yes. If we make some modifications to the wings, it can give increased mobility and turns. It's also large enough to include a deflector shield. Additionally, if we can close and open the wings, we can make it more available in terms of space. Lyra analyzed. She truly was a genius within spacecraft to deduce that within seconds. Yes, I agree. It has the potential. This design could also be potentially modified for bombing if we want to. Waylex said with excitement dripping off his tone. It's great that you guys think my design is good. Now I also have another design. It's an inspiration from the Harrower class used by the Sith. And it's a Star Destroyer. I said as I showed them the drawing of the Gladiator I Star Destroyer. This is also meant to be a carrier. I said. Both Lyra and Waylex was looking at the design intensely. I see how it's taken from the Harrower class. It also had a decent amount of firepower. It could work exceptionally as a support carrier or escort. Lyra said, being superior in the art of battleships. You are better than me at that, Lyra. I agree. It won't be the level of the Venator, but it won't be as expensive. It also has better point defense cannons. Waylex finished. He then looked at me. Both these designs are quite good. We will need about a month to finish the designs as this is just an outer description. We will focus on the starfighters first. Now what's our engineer options? Waylex asked and stated at the same time. I am considering buying the Stellar Tech Solutions, They have about 3,000 engineers and a ICM-09. I said as I looked at them for a reply. If you can buy them then that would be a good start. The ICM is great for building starfighters and 2 larger battleships, but it can't take any more than that. The builders of stellar tech however is quite good, though they lack in designs. I believe we can make up for it. He said. Well, I won't hold you up anymore. I'll talk with the CEO of Stellar Tech Solutions and inform you whether or not we get it. I said as both of them stood up, bowed slightly before turning around and walking out. However, not before I sent them the designs. It was indeed a good choice to recruit them. And with that I began looking at Stellar Tech Solutions. Apparently they were led by a certain Colleen Fan. He was a human with a degree in engineering on Coruscant. However, he couldn't properly make ship blueprints and would have to rely on others. He sadly had bad luck and therefore couldn't accomplish his dream of becoming a big corporation. He had also racked up debt because he refused to give up on his company, which I personally admired him for. It isn't everywhere you find someone willing to rack up huge debts for their company. Shows true love in what he does. Well, currently we have about 1,250,000,000 credits. I want to set off 1 billion for the Army and Naval manpower expansions. But I am willing to spend a little of it to buy Stellar Tech. The only problem is the debt. I personally want Colleen to work with me and in managing the production of ships themselves. However, that is something he cannot do with a debt. Well, we'll see what happens. And with that I called him. I had let him know earlier that I was interested in buying, which is likely why he responded almost immediately after I called and he looked calm and ready for the business talks. Greetings, I presume you are CEO Colleen? I asked over the comms. Hi, Count Thalron, the CEO of Stellar Tech Solution, an engineering corp proud of our production skills. He said with pride in his voice. Oh, I would break that soon enough. Yes indeed. Your corp has quite the reputation in producing ships. But I do see that you are struggling with the art of creating ships out of the blue. Or specifically blueprints. I replied as his face turned from pride to horror. I guess he thought I didn't know of his situation. You've been dealt a bad hand. Too many useless designers demanding better pay. But you personally are one of the better CEOs I've seen. You stacked up huge debt in your personal name to keep the business afloat. It takes a lot of determination and courage to pull that off. Thank you, Count. I appreciate your kind words. But if you know all this, why did you want to buy a company that is failing and barely afloat? He asked. Because I still see potential. I have 2 of the galaxy's best designers under me and ready to work with you to create starfighters and star destroyers. We already have plans and designs in the making. If you sell to us, you will have a new promising starfighters in a month's time. I said with a smile as the guy regained hope. I see, I will gladly sell to you. But what will it cost? I have stacked up 150 million in debt and I need it paid off. If you can pay it off, then I will sell to you for 250 million credits. He said. I see, he's gonna drive a tough bargain. I'm afraid I cannot do that. But I will give you a counter deal. I will set the intergalactic banking clan off your back for 1 year and pay you 200 million for the company. And if you work hard, then you can pay off the bank in a year. I said. It would be a tempting deal. That is tempting, but simply a promise of extending it is not enough for me to give up ownership of a corporation I have worked hard for. He said with determination. Perhaps, but you will still keep your station, your crew, and new work. Sure you can back, but the chances are you'll go bankrupt. Where will your 3,000 men find jobs then? It's obvious that you care for them and the station. Is it helping them by going bankrupt and losing the station? I tried to use emotion against him. You drive a truly hard bargain. What about this? You pay off my 150 million debt and then pay 100 million for the company. He said, finally relenting. 50 million for the company. I said, even though I've got what I want. I'm just trying to teach him not. And every million counts. 90, he responded with. 55. 84. 60. 70. 62. 65. 65. And like that we came to a deal. 150 million to the banking clan. 65 for the company. And he continues to work there. I count that as a big win. Okay, so now that you're with us, I want you to take the star station to Thyferra. I'll send 2 squadrons and 2 CR-90 corvettes to your location to escort you. I said as he nodded. When you arrive, place yourself in the atmosphere. I will come there and meet you directly alongside our 2 new professionals once we arrive at Thyferra. If we reach it before you, then we just gotta wait. No big deal. I said. I'll see you in a bit then, Count. He said before we both cut the line. Well, that was a great business deal. I got a cool and efficient station officer and builder. I got 2 of the best designers. I also have a lot of extra cash to pump into the business. I should be able to become amongst the big shipbuilding corporations. And now I needed to discuss what to name my own back-to-tub business. After all, I can't continue being pushed down by these corporations without a homeworld. Well, let's focus on getting back home now. It will take 2 days. Now that I think on it, we'll probably reach it before Kaleem. Oh well. However, one last thing before I went to bed. I opened the comms and talked to Alexander. Alexander, tell Admiral Jamie that I asked him to send 2 corvettes and 2 Z-95 squadron to the coordinates I'm sending over to you now. They're looking for a large ship engineering station. It's called Stellar Tech Solutions, and it's led by Colleen Fan. I said, yes, my lord. Consider it done. Alexander said before I cut the comms. Time FO go to sleep. Chapter 10. Military Reforms. In front of me stood 50,000 men, situated in the full Veridian armor. This was a military inspection, and the formation was quite an interesting design. We had recently gone through military reforms. I decided to steal a bit from the United States Army. The area had 4 rows of formations. In each row there were 3 squares, making up the brigade. Those 3 brigades made up a single division of 15,000 men, with 3 rows that suddenly make an entire corps. Also known as the First Corps made of 45,000 men, this was the main infantry division of the entire Veridian army. Each formation was structured with 50 lines, 100 men deep. These formations were truly long. However, furthermore behind them stood a company of tanks, namely 200 of them. They were stretched out in a long line, but they formed 3 lines, with 70 in the forward ones and 60 in the back. However, what truly stood out was something else. I stood on a balcony overlooking the inspection. I stood there alongside Admiral Jamie, Prime Minister Tyr, Harry, Axel and Alexander. However, under us stood General Tyr on a podium down on the ground. And in the middle of General Tyr and the armies stood his pride, his most skilled unit, the Marines. They were all outfitted with jetpacks and their armor was quite unique. I personally designed the basics and professional armorers made it. They looked similar to the Grand Army of the Republic's Galactic Marines. Durasteel helmet, armor and boots. A warming system, meant to keep them warm in space. The armor was completely dark with red visors. Their helmet was outfitted with a black overmask making their entire face hidden and only visors letting them see through. Under the black mask they have a breathing system, letting them breathe and live in space for up to 10 hours. They also had macro binoculars on top of their helmet. They stood in front of the formation spanning the entire width of the rest of the army. They were situated in 10 rows of 500 men. Apparently had been standing there for 6 hours before I even arrived. General Tyr sure is tough. The last group was the Royal Guard. I didn't count them in the original number due to them technically not being a part of it. But they had increased their forces to 2,000, albeit 1,000 was still undergoing training, and as such only 1,000 stood there. They had formed up in a line going from the podium, through a gap in the Marines' formation meant for people to stand and to the regular army. That length was about 200 men, with double columns on both sides that was 800 and lastly 150 were stationed around the podium where General Tyr stood. The last 50 were guarding me. My lord, now comes the interesting part, Admiral Jamie said with excitement. And as he said that, 5 Alpha, 3V wings flew above us in an astonishing speed. They flew in a wedge formation. And they released colorful air behind them. The colors were white and black, the colors of House Veridian. First came the 5 Alpha 3. Then came 3 DP-20 frigates. They had no extra showcasing but simply their guns. The DP-20s was then followed by 2 CR-90 corvettes. That's when it became silent for a few seconds, before the second largest ship in our fleet arrived. The Cumulus Corsairs. The other ship simply shadowed for the sun for some specific areas. But the Cumulus completely overshadowed the entire parade area and the palace. The Cumulus truly was a good naval vehicle. It could carry 10 fighters which isn't bad but not good. It was decently fast and had a lot of turbo laser cannons. And with that, the parade was finished for me. The troops would walk through the city and the ships would do the same routine one more time in the city as well. We had decided against having me join the parade, mainly due to the dangers. I would directly be exposed to laser fire. I wasn't any Jedi whom could spot and block laser by simply sensing them. With that, I turned around and walked back into the palace. My council followed me as well. Tyr joined us on the way. We headed directly for the council room. I sat down at my head chair and waited for the other members to get themselves situated. And soon enough, everyone was ready for the meeting. Alright gents, let's begin the meeting. Last time I gave each one of you some important tasks and I wish to know how you've proceeded with them. I asked and I looked towards General Tyr. He clearly understood and began talking. My lord, he replied as he stood up. I have fulfilled most obligations. I have increased our total army size to 50,000. I took our 5,000 most elite and veteran units and trained them as Marines. Now the newly recruited 10,000 men are quite lacking in the use of vibroswords, but they are a bit underpassable in terms of using guns. However, I realized we were lacking in some important places. Artillery and tanks. The amount of combat vehicles we have would work, but due to our militaristic focus on quality and not quantity, we need more tanks and artillery to do mass damage. He said. I agree. General, work with Prime Minister Jason to purchase 600 AV-7 anti-vehicle artillery cannon from Tame and Bach. Additionally, contact Mundell Motors and buy 400 Canderous-class assault tanks. But how much did you require to increase your forces in total? I asked as he picked up his datapad and looked it over. In total, I spent about 10 million on recruiting them because they require payment on first day. But we need to set off 110 million for the entire year. So 120 million total. I spent an additional 20 million on their gear and 10 million on their basic training. So 150 million total. But I need another 50 million for their training. He said with a smile. Happy that he got it far under the 500 million budgets. This was good. Even with the tank and artillery bonus, we're still under the budget. Each of the new tanks costs 200,000 credits and 400 is therefore 80 million credits. Each of the artillery pieces is 20,000 and a total of 12 million credits. So 92 million credits. 242 million credits for the army improvements. Very good. You'll get 8 million credits to train 2,000 tank crew and 1,000 artillery crew. Do not spare any expenses as we need them as elite as possible. If you need anything else then inform me. I said as Tyr nodded and sat back down. I then began speaking. Okay, so, before we continue, I'll announce military reforms. You've already seen a bit of the new units, but I'll explain them now alongside the new ranks. I said as I showed them a ranking system on the holopad. Enlisted ranks. Private. Private first class. Specialist. Corporal. Sergeant. Non-commissioned officer. NCO. Staff sergeant, sergeant major, warrant officer. Junior officer ranks. Second lieutenant. First lieutenant. Captain. Officer ranks. Major. Colonel. Commander. Command ranks. Senior commander. Marshal commander. Field marshal. High command ranks. Field general. General. Supreme general. These are the army ranks. Let us move on to army units. I said as I switched over to a unit showcase on the holopad. The first is a team. They are made of 6 soldiers. And led by a corporal. They're a basic unit. The second is a squad, a total of 12, led by a sergeant and 2 corporals. The third is a platoon, 50 men, plus a lieutenant and a warrant officer. The fourth is a company, 200 men, for platoons led by a captain. The fifth is a battalion, 1,000 men, for companies, led by a colonel. The sixth is a brigade, 5,000 men, 5 battalions, led by a commander. The seventh is a division, 15,000 men, 3 brigades, led by a senior commander. The eighth is a corps, 45,000 men, 3 divisions, led by a marshal commander. The ninth is a field army, 135,000 men, 3 corps, led by a field general. The 10th is an army group, 540,000 men, 4 field armies, led by a general. The last is the Grand Army, 540,000 plus men, led by the Supreme General. I took a few seconds break to let them catch up. Now let us move on to Navy ranks. I said as I switched the holo image again. Navy ranks. Enlisted ranks. Crewman apprentice, crewman, senior crewman, petty officer, junior officer, chief petty officer, master chief petty officer, ensign. Officer ranks. Lieutenant junior grade, lieutenant, lieutenant commandé. Senior officer ranks. Commander, captain, commodore. Command ranks. Lower rear admiral, upper rear admiral, vice admiral. High command. Admiral, fleet admiral. And as usual I switched page. Our units are as following and ships are as follows. Ships. Capital large. Tector class star destroyer. Providence class destroyer. Venator class star destroyer. Medium. Recusant class. Munificent class. Gladiator class. Acclamata. Small. Cumulus class corsairs. Diamond class cruiser. Aquitans. Support. DP-20 frigate. CR-90 corvette. First is a squadron, led by a lieutenant commander plus 1 small capital ship, 3 support vessels. Second is a flotilla, led by a captain plus 1 medium, 2 small capital ships, for support vessels. Third is a task force, led by rear admiral plus 1 large, 2 medium, and 6 small capital ships. Fourth is a fleet, 6 large, 12 medium and 15 plus small/support ships, led by a vice admiral. Fifth is an armada, 12 plus large, 30 plus medium, 40 plus support, led by admiral plus. I said as I finally finished. Now these units are the main ones. However, we need to switch things up. Like for the army, you can't have someone above the rank of marshal commander as that is the highest unit and we don't need any higher rank. Similarly for the navy, we don't have any large capital ships, so we simply use a medium one instead. The navy also has the same restrictions as the army. I said I shut down the holopad. Chapter 11. Council reports. So, Harry, how is the progress in the effort to enslave the Vratics? I asked as he stood up. My lord, the effort is going slow but steady. We are currently building a large Vratic city which will be able to house 40 million Vratics. We don't want to increase the capacity any more than that because we need to be able to properly control the aliens. However, our current 15 million is in a camp on the south side of the planet, called Camp V1. The capital Zotsixi is on the east side of the planet. He said before taking a break. However, before I can go into detail, I'll need to explain the simple but detailed creation of Bacta. Bacta is the result of mixing the bacteria Redolotzi and cavum with a viscous fluid known as ambori. Lastly, we would need to add a type of barely named Vertixia renanicus. Alotzi and cavum can be made and created anywhere. However, Vertixia renancius is special to Thyferra and the Vradix. He said as he pulled up a new picture on the holopad. The Vertixia is made by receiving a small amount of water through their roots. However, here is the catch. The planet is divided into 4 parts. The east, west, south, and north. The planet has a total of 3 water bodies, 2 oceans and 1 lake. The capital is built around the lake while the other 2 oceans are situated on the edge of the eastern side. He continued. The requirements to grow Vraxtixia are easy. However, the way of accomplishing is quite different. For Vraxtixia they require barely enough water to survive. However, what makes it difficult is the fact that Vraxtixia root wants as much water as it can. Meaning if you grow Vraxtixia even close to a water body it will suck up too much water within a minute. He spoke. Meaning that Vraxtixia cannot be grown on the east side. Only the west, north and south. That is why all these 3 parts are unoccupied by humans except the slavers and enforcers. Currently the entire south has been transformed into harvest fields for the Vraxtixia. We are also currently in the works of transforming the entire west area to fields as well, as the south side is getting full. Another problem is that only Vradix can grow them. This is due to their species' natural warmth and fingers which don't interfere with the planet. A single touch from a human will kill the plant. He said. The plants require under 8% moisture, or the plant will die no matter the number of oceans and lakes. However, it requires more than 5% to not die. This is why the creation of Bacta is so incredibly hard and specific. He said as he finished with the basics. Now, on to the forced recruitment of Vratix. The city is building 400,000 beds every single month. However, they are not quite hospitable and only include a bed. However, it helps that we have 100,000 builders currently working on it, and as such we are inducting 3.4 million every single month. The total recruitment is currently 6.8 million. He said as he sat down, ending his speech. The pictures I see of the camps are more advanced and better prison camps. However, everyone get more than enough food, they aren't forced to do things except work, and they aren't punished unless they cause problems. Additionally, hygiene is incredibly important. We also plan on building the city more comfortable after we have gathered all the Vradix. I then looked towards Axel, the chief of security. How goes the recruitment of both police and enforcement officers, Axel? He then stood up and began speaking. My lord, the recruitment of the police officers is finished. We now have a total of 160,000 police officers. While the new batch is a bit undertrained, they have been assigned a veteran police officer and they are getting proper training every single day. Their equipment includes 1 E500 riot gun, 1,000 credits, commando pistol, 700, armor, 1,500 credits, totaling 256 million credits of the original 500 million. He replied. Now on to the enforcers. I have recruited a total of 68,000 recruits with 34,000 being trained every single month to enforce the new batches of Radix, costing a total of 73,100,000 every single month. Currently, we've spent a total of 146,200,000 additional to the 256 million credits, which comes out to a total of 402,200,000 credits. I need a total of 672 million to pay for the police officers' monthly stipend, and 1,028,500,000 in total for the enforcers. It increases every single month by 2. And as such I need 1 billion extra credits to manage. He said as he waited for my response. Harry, would it be fine to transfer 1 billion from you to him? I asked. He stood up and responded. My lord, that will be more than fine. We only require 1 billion to build the city itself and 600,000 to pay the workers. He said before sitting down. Very well. 1 billion will be transferred to you, Axel. I said as he nodded and sat down. I then turned to Tyr and Jamie. Oh right. What is the amount of cash required for each of your new troops? I asked. Tyr stood up first. My lord, the 10,000 men required an A310 blaster rifle for 1,500, a commando pistol for 700, and lastly armor for 3,000 each. However, I only needed 5,000 new sets due to them getting those who transferred to Marines' old armor. However, the 5,000 Marines require armor to 3,500 credits. The first 5,000 comes out to 15,02,200. And 17,502,200 respectively for a total of 32,504,400 credits. He said before sitting down at my signal. Good now, Jamie? I asked and Jamie stood up. My lord, luckily naval armor costs a lot less than army ones. I added 10,000 men and women to our ranks, 9,000 crewmen and 1,000 pilots, and the crewmen require a uniform worth 200 and a commando pistol worth 700 credits, a total of 900 per man, so a total of 8.1 million credits. He said. However, the pilot armor is much more expensive at a whooping 4,000 credits plus a commando pistol each, which will cost 4,700,000 credits each. Quite the expense, but it is worth it with the exceptional armor. I decided to steal a lot from my own world's air force but added the space capabilities. Very good. This is truly some great progress within a meager 2 months. But now, on to a more critical area. What is the progress on hunting down my father assassins? I asked as Alexander stood up. My lord, I just got information from our information network. They have escaped to the small planet of Pendrillion, between us and Yag Tool. It is a small planet the same size as a moon, with no life, just rock. However, it has an atmosphere breathable for 3 hours before you need to enter a non-toxic atmosphere for 5 hours straight. A scout ship reported that they have set up a base. He said as I began thinking. This was great. Other than the fact my father was killed, I now have a motive to attack and take over the moon. Very well. What is their military force? I asked. They have an extremely powerful force for a pirate. 3 CR, 90 corvettes equipped with max turbolasers, and they have 1 Cumulus-class Corsair. A total of 40 pirate snub fighters. 20 on the outpost and 20 on the ships. He said. Admiral. What is the hangar capacity of the Munificent Star frigate? I asked and he stood up. My lord, the Munificent Star frigate has 2 hangars, each capable of holding 20 Alpha 3V wings. But sadly, the hangar space is not that long and therefore can only take 10 Z-95 headhunters. Therefore, I plan on only equipping them with Alpha 3s as they would be more effective. He spoke. I see. And when are the Munificents arriving? I asked and he immediately responded. 2 days, my lord. He said with a smile. Great. Immediately after they arrive, equip one of them with 40 Alpha 3s. The Munificent will be transported by 2 Cumulus-class Corsairs. Each Cumulus has 250 troops and the Munificent carrier has 4,500. Therefore, have the 5,000 Marines join them on this mission. I will personally oversee the operation. I said, surprising everyone there. My lord, that is a straight-up battlefield. You cannot be present as the only heir and bloodline of the Veridian family? Prime Minister Jason exclaimed. Jason, I am leading Thyferra. I need to learn how to wage war. And where better than during this relatively small battle? It will be small, but a battle nonetheless. And even if we simply stood there and shot it without resisting, I would still have the time to escape. I said with a smile. I would finally participate in my own battle. All right, that should be all for today. You are all dismissed. I said as they stood up and left. Behind me stood John. John, contact Waylex. We need to discuss something. I said while sitting down. I realized something. I forgot gunships. There was no way for my troops to enter the surface without the ships directly landing. Sure, it works for the 2 Cumulus, but that's barely 500 men. And with that, I took out a paper and began drawing. It was completely stupid for me to overlook something so extremely obvious. Well, it wouldn't matter due to the Marines' jetpack. But it truly would in any later battles. And soon enough Waylex arrived. Count Thalron, what do you require of me? He asked with a slight bow. Relax and sit down, Waylex. I have a new design for you. I said as I showed him the LAT. He took a few seconds to think before responding. As usual, you come with excellent outer designs. With this, I can add space-proof doors to allow short space travel. I can also include 30 men and potentially a few speeders. However, as last time, it will take a month to find the fitting materials and products. However, I am confident I can get you the first prototype within a month. He said with a smile. Will that be all? He continued. I have one more thing I wish for you to make a blueprint of. It will be a secondary priority, but I want you to build on it as well. It is called a Lamba shuttle. I want it equipped with a main and secondary hyperdrive, making it as fast as possible. It includes 6 seats in the cockpit. Then a further 20 seats in the main area. It will include 4 storage rooms and 4 small studio rooms, a refresher, and weapons storage. The strongest shielding possible, and it includes 8 laser cannons, 6 forward and 2 behind. I said as he took in the information and I handed him the drawing. It should be more than possible to do. But I'm gonna need to work with Lyra and it will probably take 2 months. He said. I see, that will be more than possible. I'll also be giving Lyra a blueprint. I said as he nodded and stood up. He left soon after. I'll go visit Lyra. I told John as I began walking to her chambers. And that I did. I walked towards her chambers. And when I entered, I found her stuck to the hologram. As usual. Apparently, she was working on a new Star Destroyer called the Imperator-class Star Destroyed. In the original work, it was introduced in 19 BBY. It was the Imperial Star Destroyer with 2 bridges, increased hangar space, and more shielding throughout the ship instead of just the bridge. But in return, it had a crew of 40,000 and no tractor beam. But the armament was the same if not better due to larger reactors. After entering, I joined her in making the Imperator. I suggested the outer design and how it could be done. After 1 hour of this, we took a break where we talked a bit about different topics. But I showed her the blueprint of the Gladiator, 1 destroyer. I also asked her to focus on this and make the blueprints within a year, which she agreed to in return for me giving her extra funds for her new Star Destroyed, which I agreed to do. And with that, we continued with small talk for 2 hours before I finally left. It was dark and I needed to sleep. Chapter 12, Battle Preparations. My lord. A voice ran over my comlink. I recognized the voice as Jamie, the Admiral. Yes, Admiral? I asked, though I knew what it was about. The 4 Munificent-class frigates just exited hyperspace. We have already sent 40 Alpha, 3 V-Wings to 1 Munificent and 2 Corsairs are prepared for departure, each armed with 10 Alpha 3s each. He said. Very good. I'll be making my way towards the hangar. I said before turning the connection off. I then hooked my comlink on to another sequence. Alexander, gather a company of my father's most loyal men in the Royal Guard. We're heading to the Munificent. The first battle since my father's death is happening. They are getting their revenge. Also bring my Nadine Vibrasword Crestfall. Yes, my lord. The men will be happy to finally get their revenge for their fallen count. He said as I could hear the happiness in his voice. Alexander was recruited, taught, and fed by my father. And as such deep within he has a deep wish for revenge and to kill the parties responsible. And with that I stood up from my desk and headed to my closet. However, this wasn't my usual closet. It was my armory. However, this armor was indeed very special. The ancient armor of the Veridian family. During the fall of the Old Republic, when we were simply a mercenary company, we were hired by the Old Republic to defend against Mandalorian warriors. When we met them, my ancestor engaged one Mandalorian in single combat, killing him. Apparently, he was their leader. As a show of respect, the Mandalorian granted us his armor, and in return we never fought with the Mandalorian again. A few Mandalorians even married into our house. The Mandalorian armor was small. It included very little armor. It had the usual chest plate, shin guards and shoulder guards. It also included bracer guard and the small little unleasher protector. That thing that shoots P if you don't understand. However, something that made this special, it had a different color, and something that made it special. Usual Mandalorians would have the thigh guard. But instead of thought guard it had the usual Death Watch side guard, guarding just a bit of the front but mainly on the sides where the gun was placed. However, what truly made it unique was its colors and design. It was black by nature with golden and white lines all over the armor. It had a singular golden aiguilette shoulder cord going around the right shoulder. Pictures in comments. Beside the armor lay 2 commando pistols, an ARC 9965 blaster rifle and a jetpack. But sadly no helmet. The Mandalorian helmet was what symbolized the Mandalorian culture, and only true Mandalorians could use them. The armor however could be used during certain exceptions. One of which was my ancestor's acceptance in using it. I spent 4 minutes going through my memories and getting it on correctly. I holstered my commando pistol and equipped myself with the jetpack. I had gotten jetpack and pistol training. I began going through them. Apparently, I controlled the jetpack through my bracers which also included whip parts and flamethrowers on my right arm, controlled the jetpack on the left and it included double blasters and darts. I spent 5 minutes simply going over the controls and getting used to them. Sure, I wouldn't fight like a Mandalorian anytime soon, but it would work for now. With that I took up my ARC 9965 and began waking out. Outside I found John and Rob. Greetings again. I said. Greetings, my lord. Hello, Count. John and Rob each said. Rob, hold my blaster, will you? I said as I handed him the blaster without waiting for an answer. I heard John chuckle beside me while Rob simply deadpanned at me then him. And with that we continued on. After 5 minutes we arrived at the hangar. There stood a Cumulus-class Corsair and a company of 200 men. They stood in front of me with Alexander at the forefront. Greetings. Alexander. Is the men ready for the final revenge? I asked as I approached. Yes, my lord. He said as he signaled for one of the guys to step forward. He then came forward carrying the Nadine Vibrasword. It was in a white sheath with a silver outline. It looked like any other Nadine Vibrasword, however I could feel that it was lighter, stronger and sturdier. I took it and equipped it to my back, in a straight line beside my jetpack. All right, thanks Alexander. Now let's get a move on. I said as I entered the Cumulus. This wasn't the first time I was inside one. I had been within one multiple times since we got the first one a month ago. After everyone entered the Cumulus, it took off. I was still training on how to fly as my father hadn't included that in my so vital training. Either way I stood behind the pilot as the Munificent came into view. The Munificent was truly a vital piece of the Trade Federation and the banking clan's defense and security. Sure, they may not be quite equal to the Venator, much less the future Star Destroyers, but they were a nightmare to any other defense fleet. One Munificent could take 10 of the Judicial Force's ships. The Munificent was one of the largest ships currently available. And it showed. Even in the relatively big Cumulus Corsairs we were completely overshadowed by the large Munificent-class star frigate. We docked at one of the emergency docking channels. The Cumulus had one such at the tip of its batter ramp, which allowed us to board enemy frigates after ramming it. Once I entered the Munificent someone met me. Greetings, my lord. I am Commodore Flint. I have been directly assigned to you to serve on any ship you command, my lord. Kind of like a personal naval assistant, he said while saluting. I see, at ease. Now inform me of the situation regarding the ship and the pirates. I said as I began walking. He quickly followed. My lord, all the V-Wings have been transferred to their ships. With your Cumulus's arrival the fleet should be ready to move. We're simply waiting on you, he replied. The ship's status is in good condition. It has been fueled and we have gathered enough Tabana gas to supply our cannons for a rotation of pure firepower, which should be more than enough, he said. I see. And what of the Marines and their progress? I asked. The 6 CR-90 corvettes has worked hard for 15 minutes now, making flights to the planet and to the Munificent many times to transport the troops. But everyone should be transported on board about now, he said. And what of their equipment and position? I asked. They have been stationed in the hangar. They are being given enough oxygen to last 10 hours in space, and fuel for their jetpacks. They will deploy from the hangar as we don't have the means to transport them to the surface quickly, he said as we reached the halfway mark. I see. Make sure they are not in the way for the pilots and fighters. Now what if the crew? We have performed weapons test on the weapons connected to the bridge, and we are currently running checks on the manually controlled turrets and the point defense weapons, he said. I see. And what of the engineers and others? I asked. The engineers have been strategically stationed throughout the ship to attend to any damage as quick as possible. The navigators and starfighters control are also prepared and ready for takeoff, he said. And with that we entered. Very well. Send a message to all fleets to prepare to jump to hyperspace, I said as he ran off. I walked to the command seat. Beside it stood Admiral Jamie. Greetings, Admiral. How is it going? I asked as he immediately got exited. I can't believe we've reached this point in our naval expansion. To think we would ever carry 4 medium capital ships capable of fighting a Republic judicial fleet is astonishing, he said with emotion. I thought he was about to begin crying for a second. That is good to hear, Admiral. Now how is the crew going? I asked as I sat down. They are all really excited to be able to participate in the first large-scale war since decades ago on Thyferra. They all also believe you will take them to the next level, and therefore each of them has unconditional loyalty and they support you, he said with a next-degree smile and pride on his and his naval companions' accomplishments. That is very good. Now have the scout ship reported anything? I asked as his attitude changed from joyful to serious. My lord, the ship informs us that there is no ship outside the planet's atmosphere. This is likely due to the fact that travelers are forced to exit hyperspace when coming close to the moon due to its gravitational pull. They don't want to be spotted and therefore have all their ship camped on the ground, he said as I began thinking. That information is just reinforcing my determination and decision to transform the moon into a military outpost. I see. And where is the outpost stationed? I asked. My lord, the moon has no planetary rotation, and the outpost is therefore always at the same place. It is positioned on the edge between the north and east side, facing the hyperspace exit. They have their cumulus and the 3 corvettes stationed around the outpost in dedicated forest landings. The outpost has 3 turbolasers and 6-point defense cannons. It can hold up to 500 pirates according to my information. Alongside the 3 CR-90 and the cumulus, it is expected that they can have up to 1150 pirates. And information dictates that there are over 700 pirates, so between 700-1150 pirates, he said. I see. Do you know of any military hardware they possess? Tanks, artillery, rotating cannons or turrets? I asked and he opened his datapad. They apparently possess 2 anti-vehicles artillery pieces. However, they are meant for anti-ship use. But they could be a threat. However, we could not find out about any turrets except that they recently attacked a judicial squadron and therefore they might have some. That's where they got one of their CR-90 corvettes, Jamie responded. I see. What about our handheld explosives or rocket launchers? I asked and Jamie smiled. Apparently, the Trade Federation was generous enough to refill our armory. So we currently have 100 rocket launchers, 20,000 class a thermal detonator, and 50 E-Web repeating blaster, he said. Great. Give every Marine we have 4 A thermal detonators. Have 50 of them carry rocket launcher and transfer 10 E-Webs to the Royal Guard Company, I said before turning to Alexander who stood behind me as well. I assume your men knows how to assemble and use them? I asked, to which he nodded. Good. Transfer all your men to one of the cumulus. You'll be landing without jetpacks. You will need to set up dead points and fight inside the base. Use the corridors and move forward with the E-Webs. But the tactics are ultimately up to you, I said, deciding our approach. All right, Commodore Flint, order all ships to jump to hyperspace upon my command, I said as I waited for each of the cumuluses to acknowledge. As the last one did I issued the command. Jump to hyperspace. Chapter 13. Naval Battle. All pilots. We are exiting hyperspace in 3 minutes. Enter your fighters and prepare for deployment. All gunners get yourself seated. Commodore Flint's voice came over the speakers. All over the Munificent's pilots and crewmen were running through the corridors. Red lights flashed through the ship. The bridge, however, was an entirely different atmosphere. The bridge radiated experience and control. Every single one of the naval crewmen was calm outwardly, but inwardly each of them was sweating. They were about to enter their first ever naval battle. Although the chance of defeat is almost nil, the principle of war scared many. Count Thalron Veridian was one such example. Holy shit. I am actually leading a naval battle. I never lead a naval battle on the sea, but space is like 15 levels over that, and I didn't even do the first. I thought as I looked over my command bridge. Well, at least my men are calm. I thought to myself. If only he knew how wrong he was. Oh well. I might as well make the best of this safe battle. There is legit zero chance of me losing unless I royally fuck up or they have a hidden fleet. I was then forced out of my thoughts as a voice rang out. My lord. We're 145 seconds out of the moon of Pendrillion. The navigation officer said. Commodore. What is the situation on the starfighters? I said as I looked at Flint. He had been assigned command over the starfighters. There are only a few remaining pilots not having entered their fighters. They are expected to enter 1 minute before we arrive at the least. He spoke. Very good, very good. Colonel Lux, are you Marines prepared? I asked a man standing behind me on my left. Admiral Jamie stood on my right. He was wearing standard Marine armor but with 2 yellow stripes on his right shoulder. He was named Lux Forrest. He was the colonel of the Marine detachment. He was one of the younger commanding officers, but he was showing extraordinary talent in leading men in the field. My lord, my Marines are all prepared and outfitted with the new detonators. They're rallied close to the hangar, able to jump the second the order is given. He said as he saluted me. Very good, Colonel. You may join your men. I said as I waved him off. He nodded and left the bridge. All right, how long till we exit hyperspace? I asked the navigation officer. Expected arrival is in 67 seconds, my lord. He said. All right. 1 minute. All ships, form up in the wedge formation. The Munificent will serve as its main ship. I said to the Cumulus lieutenants over the comlink. Yes, Count Thalron. Understood, my lord. I heard 2 voices come over the comlink as the radar system showed the 2 Cumulus-class Corsairs moving a bit back and to the side to form up with the Munificent. 30 seconds to exit. The navigator said. Flint, order all fighters to prepare for takeoff. I said as he once again repeated it over the speakers. Are all pilots in position? I asked and Jamie responded this time. Yes. Every pilot is in their fighter except one who's running back from the refresher. He said as I began chuckling. Well, we can't have them shitting in our fighters. I said while chuckling. 15 seconds. 10. 8. Speak the last 5 over the speakers. I said to Flint. 5 seconds to arrival. 4. 3. 2. 1. Exiting hyperspace. He shouted as the scenery outside the windows changed. From the blue stream of everlasting hyperspace lines to the sight of a beautiful gray moon. Sure, it wasn't quite the sight of Alderaan, but it was respectable. It quite looked like the gray moon orbiting around Earth in my previous life. All ships, head towards the moon of Pendrillion. I said as the Munificent and the 2 Corsairs turned towards the moon. Commodore, what is the status of the pirates? I asked as I leaned forward in my seat, and put my hands under my chin in a proper thinking pose. My lord, the scanners show hundreds of life forms rushing out of the base towards the ships. The scanners also show multiple pirate snub fighters starting up. He said, all right, place bombs on 5 of the V-wings and have them stay back. When ordered, have them focus on bombing the still grounded ships. I said as the lead engineer turned to speak with his comrades on the comms. Commodore Flint, deploy all fighter squadrons. Work in teams and use our superior numbers. I said and he nodded and turned around to his control panel. Immediately after, the ray shields on the 2 Cumulus opened and 20 Alpha, 3 V-wings rushed out. Similarly, the hangars on the Munificent opened and a total of 35 V-wings swarmed out. They then met in the middle and formed up into their squadrons while flying down. 2 squadrons of 12 and 1 of 11. We'll continue at a relatively slow pace down to the planet. We will not be entering the atmosphere before we have gained complete aerial superiority. However, Admiral, order the 2 Cumulus Corsairs to hurry ahead. They will be tasked with fighting the enemy vessels. I said and each of them reported the orders further to the Cumulus Corsairs. And with that time passed as we slowly headed towards the planet, the Corsairs were faster, but it would still take some time. However, down on the surface it was entirely different. The 55 Alpha, 3 V-wings were fighting 40 snub fighters. And the pirates were outclassed in every single one of the 3 aspects that change the pure fighter to fighter battle. 1. Numbers, 55 to 40. We win of course. Training. Our fighters have gone through multiple years of training, and in each of these 60 fighters are our most experienced and skilled pilots. Meanwhile, the pirates haven't received any military training and simply tried themselves out, though they have gotten far. But they don't even compare to the droid pilots of the CIS, who were known for being shit. Technology the last. The Alpha 3 V-wing was a small and nimble starfighter, made for intercepting other fighters. Its maneuverability was close to that of the Vultures, and coupled with the skilled fighters it completely outshone the technical weak snub fighters. Lastly, it had strong shield generators. The snub fighters' shield generators were so weak they basically didn't exist. Due to these numerous differences, the result was determined before the battle began. Immediately after the initial clash, the Alpha 3s lost no fighters, but a few did take some hits. However, the snub fighters lost 5 starfighters. However, that's when the outpost's point defense guns and laser turrets started up and began firing at the Thyferran starfighters. However, it didn't matter much. The Alpha 3V wing could brush off 4 solid hits without losing anything. This is Exegol. 7. I got 3 of them on my tail. I need assistance. I heard from the pilot comms, followed by, this Exegol 3, me and Exegol 4 is on our way. Another rang out, and soon enough I noticed Exegol 7's voice again. Thank you, Exegol 3 and 4. I am returning to the Munificent for repairs. All right. Flint, how is the battle going? I asked as he turned around to face me. Scanners show that we have shot down 23 of their fighters. Meanwhile they have yet to shoot down any of our ships. However, 3 needed to return for repairs. This is due to the swift reinforcements if you are struggling. He said with a slight smile. This was excellent news. Great. Order the Cumulus Corsairs to push into the atmosphere. What is the situation on their naval vessels? I asked. According to our fighters, then the 3 CR-90s and the Cumulus has taken off and are headed to the battle. He said. My lord, if those 4 vessels reach the dogfights, then we will suffer unnecessary casualties due to their heavy laser turrets. Admiral Jamie said. I know, Admiral. This isn't good. Pilots double our speed. We are heading to the dogfight. I said as I leaned back into my chair and turned my comlink on. Colonel Lux, we are heading into the atmosphere. Prepare your men. I said as he responded with a, yes, sir. And I closed my comlink. Admiral, order the 2nd Corvette that includes the 200 Royal Guards to land after we arrive. Order them to set up a position to attack the outpost. I said. Jamie nodded and followed my orders. And with that we spent 4 minutes simply waiting as our ship entered the atmosphere and closed in on the fighters. We can now see the battle. Scans show that the enemy barely has 10 fighters left while we have 48. 2 are returning for repairs and 5 are currently undergoing repairs. 2 have also been sent out from repairs. He said. Good. And what about the 2 Cumulus Corsairs? I asked. The 2 Cumulus is engaged with the 4 enemy vessels. They have shot down 1 CR-90. The enemy Corsair barely has any shields left. He spoke. Very good. Send the 2nd Cumulus down to the enemy outpost. Have them land the 200 Royal Guards, then attack the outpost's cannons. I said, and Commodore Flint repeated the order to the 2nd Cumulus. Now, have all turbo lasers focus on the Cumulus. And aim the ion cannons at the 2 CR-90 corvettes. I said. I then turned on my comlink. Colonel Lux, gather 300 men into 2 units of 150. They will be boarding CR-90 corvettes. Yes, my lord. I'll get my elite troops. Just say the word and we'll jump out. He responded over the comms. Very good. You'll jump out of the hangars with jetpacks. I said before closing the comlink. All right, we'll get ourselves straight above the CR-90s. All cannons fire at the Cumulus. I said as the turbo lasers turned towards the Cumulus and began unleashing waves of laser. Their shield integrity is at 30%, a officer said. 20%. 10%. 5%. Their shields are deactivated. Overload our turbo lasers, 120% laser output. I said as the streams of lasers increased. No more than 10 seconds later they began falling. Status? I asked. Weapons need 10 seconds to cool down. The CR-90s have lost all power and the Cumulus has been destroyed beyond repair. An officer at one of the controls said. Very good. Deploy the boarding teams. I said as the same officer pressed a button giving the green light for the boarding party. I then turned on my comms again. Colonel Lux, prepare the rest of your Marines in the hangar. Yes, my lord. He responded. Flint, what is the status of our fighters? I asked. My lord, only 2 fighters are remaining attempting to flee. A squadron is upon them. The 2 other squadrons are returning. Similarly, the outpost's point defense turrets have been completely obliterated. He said. Good. When the boarding party exits the Munificent, fly above their outpost to prepare for the dropping of the rest of our forces. What are the results on the Royal Guards? I asked. This time the Admiral responded. They have set up a choke point at the main entrance and are engaging the pirates still stationed within their outpost. Approximately 800 pirates remain inside. The other Cumulus is also currently landing. The Royal Guards have also taken over their artillery. He spoke. Good. Everything is going according to plan. Order the fighters to return to their ships after finishing off the last stragglers. And move the ship towards the base. I said. This was great. Only the ground battle remained. And after a bit of waiting the information came through 30 seconds later. The entire boarding party has left the ship. You are now in the clear, my lord. Lux said. Great. Pilots move us forward. Yes, sir. He said as we began approaching the base. It would take 10 seconds to arrive in position. Colonel Lux, you will be jumping in approximately 15 seconds. Prepare your men. I spoke over the comlink. Yes, my lord. Then Flint began counting down over the hangar speakers. 15, 12, 9, 6, 3. And as we halted, he shouted, 0. Go, go, go. I looked at the hangar camera and I saw 10 rows of 200 men jumping at a time. Switching to the second camera, the same view came up. 20 seconds later the last jumped. The battle was now in the hands of Colonel Lux. We've done our job. Proceed with shield regeneration and fix up the fighters. Order the Cumulus Corsairs to become airborne. No need to be sitting targets on the ground. Prepare for artillery strikes if Lux requests it. I said as I stood up. Admiral Jamie, you're in command. I'll be in my room. I said as I walked out of the bridge. I decided to take a break. I didn't have anything else to do. Would rather practice fighting or something. Chapter 14. Ground Battle. Colonel Lux. He was a 23-year-old colonel. He had graduated from the Royal Thyferra Officer Academy 2 months ago, at the start of the year. Immediately after graduating, he was inducted into the Experimental Marine Detachment as a first lieutenant. The first year was spent dedicating himself to his new way of combat. He was much more dedicated than his friends, troops, and officers. Due to this, he quickly rose through the ranks, captain, major/training command, and lastly, he became a colonel precisely 2 weeks ago. And now he was leading his first ever battle. He had just witnessed the Lord and the one he looked up to slaughter an entire pirate defense with a meagerly 25% of our military. Though that wasn't much, we would seriously struggle to even fight them with 100% 2 months ago. He was extremely proud of what the Thyferra military has come to. From the navy, which he knew little of but knew they became 10 times stronger, to the army who had witnessed an expansion of 10,000 men. He had once dreamed about joining the Royal Guard. But now, Lux had found his home, with the 1st Marine Brigade. And now, he was leading the first ever ground assault since the assassination of the previous count. All right, men. Get your ass down on the ground. Split into squads and land with your mates. I screamed. Major, make sure everyone gets down. I said as I prepared to jump down. There were 100 meters to the ground, and I would need to use my jetpack effectively. Yes, Colonel Lux. He said as I nodded. All right, 18th Platoon. You're with me. I told the platoon that was about to jump before I jumped, and they followed me. After jumping, I had a 60-meter free fall without activating my jetpack. I looked at my computer bracer to see 50 blue dots right behind me and an additional 150 dots in different formations. The Marines had an advanced computer bracer with increased navigation and radar, allowing everyone to know where their company was at all times, and their colonel. Enemies are red, normal soldiers are blue, NCOs are green, junior officers are white, senior officers are orange, and command is yellow. The jumping formation is that you jump in platoons, and you follow your platoon warrant officer to the landing area. When the area is clear, you split into squads of 12, and you can change your computer bracer's navigation from squad, to platoon, to company, to battalion, to even brigade. But no bigger than that. Soon enough I reached the 40-meter mark, which was also determined on my computer bracer, and I started up my jetpack. I turned my body upwards, changing from a straight dive to my feet facing the ground. I then started the jetpack, which began slowing my speed down, until I reached the 10-meter mark, where I stood entirely still in the air. I waited for my platoon to catch up with me, which they did. After the last one was situated, I rotated my body 90 degrees to face the outpost, and I then accelerated my jetpack, sending me straight towards the outpost, which was 50 meters away. I then contacted the field commander, being a captain at this time. Captain, what is the situation? I said through my helmet while flying. Colonel, we have the area surrounded. I have a company stationed at every exit. There are a total of 5 side exits. The 200 Royal Guards are holding down the main entrance, where the largest fight is alongside the 250 Marines. Currently, about 1,000 have reached the surface, with another 500 coming in every minute. He said as I opened the map in my memories. If I'm correct, then the second largest entrance is closest to me? I asked, which he responded immediately. Yes, Colonel. Very good. Send 1 battalion to the main forces, then send 1 to the beta entrance, second largest. We'll be mounting an assault from those 2 sides. They are directly on the other side of each other and therefore perfect for a pincer. Also, have an E-Web be sent to every entrance and 2 to the heavy assault entrances. And split the last battalion between the entrances to ensure nobody escapes. I said as I spotted the door. It was under heavy fire. The 200 men there were holding off 300 pirates. The other 500 pirates were in the main entrance. I then switched my comms to my platoon. Warrant officer, we're landing on the beta entrance. You will take charge from here on. I said as I sped up and away. I heard a muffled understood, but I barely heard it due to my speed. When I arrived, a lieutenant stood there, waiting for me. Colonel, the captain informed me of your arrival. He said as he saluted, and I landed beside him. What is the situation? I asked. It sucks we didn't have transport ships. It makes it 10 times harder because it takes time to deploy everyone. We have lost 1 squad, but we have killed 40 pirates. He spoke. Very good. The causalities are unfortunate, but it is expected. Halt any attacks and focus on defending. We're waiting for reinforcements to launch an assault from both sides and pincer them. I said, and he nodded before running off and commanding his men. I then stepped back and began guiding company's landing. There arrived approximately 2 battalions every second minute. So, a battalion every 4th minute. The 2nd battalion was sent to the main entrance. 4 minutes later the entirety of the 3rd battalion arrived at our entrance. Lastly, the Major directed the 4th battalion between the remaining 3 entrances. We now had 1250 men here, a bit of an overshoot. But I contacted Lord Commandant Alexander. Lord Commandant, my side is ready for a full-sized assault on the beta entrance. I said, we are also ready to attack the main entrance. Just give the word. He said back on the comlink. All right. 3, 2, 1, go. And with that, I started my jetpack and flew forward, and so did the platoon I came with. The pirates obviously did not expect that, and the 1st and 2nd lines began to panic as we arrived. I smashed straight into a guy with my feet, and I then took out my dual commando pistols. Usually, you wouldn't use a jetpack in a small corridor like this, but all of us were veterans and we had spent 2 straight months being taught how to use it. No shooting training, just jetpack, and as such it was possible. The man I smashed into stood at the connection of the main corridor and a second one. There were about 20 men in this intersection. I smashed him into the wall, knocking him out for good. I then sent a boost to my jetpack as I swung around and smashed my right foot into a second guy with a roundhouse kick, who stood beside him. Another boost, but this time I rolled into the side corridor and turned around. I then began unleashing fire on the 10 men on this side of the corridor. My dual commando pistols alongside the everlasting influx of new fighters sent the first line into oblivion within 10 seconds. I then began running before I threw myself forward and started my jetpack again. Like this, we continued to slaughter the pirates one after another. After we killed 200 men, the remaining 150 began running. We pursued, but I knew we would catch them all eventually, and therefore took 500 men with me towards the command center while the rest began hunting. We were flying through the corridors at a slow pace, no faster than how Jedi run. But it only took 2 minutes before we reached the headquarters. But we weren't there fast enough. 180 royal guards stood around with unsheathed blades and 10 prisoners. The bodies of 80 men also lay alongside the command center. I then turned around. All right, all of you spread out and attack the remaining pirates. Interrogation and information team, begin interrogating and slicing the network. I said as I turned to Alexander. Hello, Lord Commandant. May I ask your men to secure the entrance to the headquarters? I know your men can take the torture, but some of my men might throw up if they see it. I said, which he nodded to. And soon enough, the screaming began. I also got reports. The E-webs had performed perfectly, cutting down any attempts to escape. Every single entrance was covered by them, and no pirates managed to escape. We also had a company fly around looking for any secret escapes. But there was none. And after 10 gruesome minutes, we got results. All right, so. The head torturer came up to me. The head of this pirate is named Gorlock. 3 months ago they got a mission to assassinate the Lord of House Veridian, and in return, they would get 2 million credits. He said, meanwhile someone was writing it down. They admit they were responsible and that they got hired almost immediately. However, we spent the next 9 minutes to get the information on who hired them. Apparently they had been threatened quite well. Anyway, those who hired them were the Zuckfer Corporation. He said, and with that my mind went into overdrive. You send that information to Count Thalron immediately. I heard Alexander said. And the one who noted things down nodded and sent them to the Munificent. Okay. Any more? I asked as my mind calmed itself. Yes, on the other side of the moon is an explosive armory that includes multiple planetary ion cannons, turbo lasers, and normal lasers. They were setting them up when we arrived. There are also 100 pirates there. They also have the 2 million credits there. He spoke. All right, order the 2 corsairs to pick up 250 men each and head there. Have our most elite men join them. I said as I sat down. I also got a notification saying that all the pirates had been exterminated. Additionally, the 2 CR-90 corvettes had been successfully boarded and taken over. All right. Give all of this to Count Thalron Veridian and inform him of the victory. However, make sure you isolate the information and defend it. Lord Commandant Alexander? Could you and your men transport it to Lord Thalron manually? I don't trust the pirate network not to potentially steal our information, or even worse. The Zuckfer Corporation. I said as I held up the datapad in the case he agreed. I agree. This information is far too important to send it over a newly acquired network and signal. Me and my company will guard this with our life. That I promise you. He said as he took the datapad, which I willingly gave him. And with that he turned around and left. I turned to the slicers. Get total control over the base and its power sources. Make sure to scan for any life forms and compare them with our navigation system to check who is ours and who is not. I said and the slicers nodded. I then enter the officer frequency on my comlink. Major, hurry up and gain a number on our causalities. And make sure you get all Temni pirate bodies removed from the base and counted for. When you are done with that, then burn them. I said and he responded with a yes, sir. I then continued but directed it at the captain. Captain Ifron, make sure you burn and take down the pirate flag. Also, send a slicer team to each of the CR-90 corvettes to harvest any potential information they may have. You never know. Oh well, I might as well join my troops in doing those things. I hope it at least makes them admire me. I said out loud as I walked towards the main battlefield. There were a lot of bodies to be removed. Chapter 15, Scheming. My lord, we need you at the bridge immediately. Your Lord Commandant is here with some information about the pirates. The voice of Admiral Jamie came over my comms. Finally. I had been here for half an hour doing absolutely nothing. Well, nothing is not correct. I was calculating the next planet to conquer or ally with. Well, I didn't come up with a decision. It truly is difficult. If we ally with a weak planet, we will be forced to protect them. And if we ally with someone too strong or situated with too much power, I have to select a weak planet but with good potential. And it must be close by. Either way, I can wait with that. And with that, I put it into the back of my mind. No use fussing over it right now. And with that, I exited my chambers and headed to the bridge. I honestly hoped the Bacta companies were responsible. It gave me a reason to accuse them. Not that I wouldn't accuse them of doing it either way. Soon enough I arrived at the bridge. Once I entered, Alexander and Jamie looked at me. I walked to the command chair and sat down. Alexander then gave me something. The hacking and interrogation revealed this information. He said as he handed the datapad. I then began reading through it. It wasn't long and just included the details, but I still used close to 3 minutes. I see. So Thyferra is behind this? They finally couldn't take the 25% it seems. I said as everyone there became angry. This is outrageous. They are only where they are now because of us. And now they betray and plot against us. The angry Jamie shouted. Calm down, Admiral, we must take caution. Admiral, order a full silence regarding this topic on the bridge. They are never to mention any of this information, or they will be executed, and their families put in jail. I said as I signaled for the Admiral to follow me. Commodore Flint, you're in command until we get back. I said as we walked out of the bridge. We then went into a meeting room close to the bridge. I stood at the front with Jamie behind me as the comm link opened and the members of the council appeared. Greetings, my lord. Prime Minister Jason said. Just then Alexander entered. Greetings, council members. I bring important and unfortunate news. I said. After interrogating the prisoners and slicing their network, we have come to the solution that the Thyferra Corporation is behind it. I said as shock went through each of their faces. What? We must punish those backstabbers. General Tyr exclaimed as he stood up. Yes, I agree with the general. We can't let this stand. Prime Minister Jamie said. This will not stand. However, we can use this to take over the Bacta industry. I said as they all began thinking. As much as I would like to say as the one responsible for Bacta, but we don't have the connections to sell 9 billion liters of Bacta, and more every single year. Harry said. Star Wars. Senator. Chapter 1. Thalron Veridian. Where am I? I said as I stood up. I realized I was laying down. However, it wasn't on the ground. No, it was quite comfy. In fact, an extremely comfy bed. Opening my eyes, I looked around. I was situated in the middle of a white room. It was hyper-advanced with doors without knobs. It had a luxurious space with a desk. The chair had control panels on the arm holders and there was a small keyboard on the desk. However, it was like the keyboard on an iPad. Lastly, in the middle there was a flat energizing square. Looked something like a lamp in the table. Why? However, before I managed to even think about why, thousands of memories, scenes and events happened in my mind. My birth, in 48 BBY. Mother dying the same day. Memories of my dad teach me of my heritage, the Veridian family, Counts of Thyferra. Thyferra was an elective monarchy. 117 million in population. 80% Vratics, the native species, 20% humans. The Vratics was a less evolved species and was slave labor. Zotsixi was the capital city. We specialized in Bacta, being responsible for about 95% of all sales. 2 moons. 2 trade routes. Rima and Shapani. 479 days every year. 7% of the planet is water. Thyferra corporate headquarters is situated on Thyferra. House Veridian owns 25% of it. How we became rich due to Bacta. We were the major seller of Bacta, even though we only sold to Thyferra and Zoltan. We had no navy, and only about 40.000 solidars. We had a total of 100 Z-95 headhunters for planetary defense, but no naval hangar. However, we had 6 CR-90s. Each could hold 2 Z-95 headhunters. The CR-90 corvettes were also outfitted with 4 dual turbolasers and 6 single turbolasers. We had a total of 38,000 infantry forces. We also had a small unit of 200 ground armored tank, but it wasn't a droid. It was another type. We also had 500 gunners and lastly 1,000 royal guards. I was taught in politics, military leadership, economics and ruling since I reached the age of 7. The Count of the Veridian family has always held the supposition of senator. Usually it is given to the heir when he is of age, but a count can also have the position if he doesn't have an heir. It is currently 34 BBY, 2 years before the conflict on Naboo. Our economical situation. Extremely good. Although there is 117 million people living on the planet, there is only 29 million humans. One human is basically equal to 3 non-humans on Veridian. They can't vote, can't join the military, can't own a company. This is how we have been suppressing them. And the Bacta industry has been flourishing. The two major corporations have yet to work together to increase prices, and therefore they sell a lot and need to buy a lot. From our more than 15 million Vradics working directly under us without selling their own. Our profits are 9 billion from Bacta and 14,625 million or 14.625 billion credits from our 25% of Zuckfra. But we can't spend everything as we like. 14 billion goes to government spending, 100 million to government officials, 1,812 million to paying solidars, police and enforcers. Another 10% goes to the Republic. And after there's only 5,350 million, and of that we spend 350,000 on maintaining our current forces and equipment, including tanks, fighters and corvettes. 5 billion credits left. And of those, half is usually spent on Vratics or personal projects. My father preferred building the cities. Oh, and one last thing. My father died yesterday. Yeah, apparently we had a party and a bomb went off and he died. And I'm currently the Count of Thyferra. But holy shit. I'm actually in the Star Wars universe, and as the Count of a politically important planet. If my knowledge is right, then Thyferra joined the Confederacy of Independent Systems and was later taken over by the two Bacta companies by the order of the Empire. Basically this entire planet was enslaved. Even the humans. To create Bacta. Well, I would make sure that didn't happen. After 2 hours of simply processing the memories, I stood up. There was a lot of them. From basic stuff like drinks and food, to advanced political factions. I walked up to my desk and sat down. My memories has given me some information on how to use it properly. I pressed a button and a blue screen appeared from the thing in the middle of the table, apparently called a hollow disk. First of which allowed me to call my assistant. And yes, I have one. He is more of my personal guard or guard commander, but it goes both way. And with that I called my Lord Commandant on his comm link. Alexander? Are you there? I asked, unsure if I called the right guy. Yes, my lord. I'm here. A manly voice came back. Good. Call the council and tell them I will meet them in the meeting room in 30 minutes. They should all be here after the party, no? I said. Oh, yes. Right away, my lord. He responded and I closed the comlink. That's when I began thinking to myself. Why was he so startled? It shouldn't be out of the ordinary for me to call him like that. And with that I continued to grumble about it until I realized 5 minutes later. Of course. Am I stupid of something? My father died 24 hours ago and I've been in my room since. I guess I need to act a little bit sad. And with that I did the trick where you got yourself to cry by pressing a certain spot in your eyes. After 15 minutes it looked like I had cried my eyes out but had stopped some time ago. Great. And with that I quickly got my clothes on before I left my room. I was outfitted in a white shirt and white pants. House Veridian was known for their white clothes and hair. The corridor was quite magnificent. It was larger than any ship corridors but not too large. Quite similar to Naboo but not the same height. The walls were light brown but with white flags hanging down all around me. Pictures were also put on the walls. Outside my room stood 2 guards. They were actually extremely fucking cool. Their helmets was similar to that of the British Royal Guard, more precisely the white hair extension coming from the top of their head. They had metal helmets similar to ancient knights. They had a white cape coming down from their shoulders. They carried a short blade on their left chest and another in a horizontal line across their back belt. They had an A310 rifle that they carried and AA-180 blaster pistol in their holster. They had Durasteel chest, arm, and shoulder armor. They had white wraps and thin armor around their stomach and waist. Lastly, they had Durasteel foot armor. There was 2 uniforms, one for officers and one for solidars. This was for the Royal Guard. Image insert of both. However, I didn't have any officers with me currently. They were too busy hunting down the potential attackers. Once I stepped out, I nodded to both of them before walking on, as I usually did. And they both followed me wordlessly. After 8 minutes of walking through the large corridors, I reached the main hall, where my usual seat was situated, similar to a throne. However, we continued on and behind the main hall and into a small room. Outside there already stood 4 guards. The corridors were large and the corridor had 2 entrances. 2 guards at each entrance and lastly my 2 guards stationed themselves at the door to the room, once I entered. When I entered there were already 6 people there waiting, whom all stood up when I entered. Please sit, we have a lot to discuss. I said as I sat down at the main chair. I could feel a lot of stares from the 6 individuals but I ignored it. Firstly, Count Thalron. I wish to offer my condolences. A man in his 60-foot AS said. Thank you, Prime Minister Jason. But let's not dwell in the past and look forward. I said as those who wanted to offer it didn't. Firstly, Lord Commandant Alexander. How is the search for the potential terrorist going? I asked and he stood up. My lord, military intelligence suggests that there could be multiple factors. Both Bacta corporations had a motive, alongside the native species. However, it could also be a plot from your enemy government. The Trade Federation has been heated for some time. He said before sitting down. I see. Order the military intelligence to focus all their manpower on this situation. Admiral Jamie, order 4 CR-90s and 2 escort squadrons to prepare for departure. Meanwhile, order all other forces to be on guard. I said as I turned to Jamie. The chief of our navy, even though it was small. That was when someone stood up abruptly. My lord, you can't possibly think of traveling now? Prime Minister Jason exclaimed. Yes, I do. I simply said without explaining myself. Why? Your safety is imperative as you are the only heir to the Veridian family. Additionally, the recent assassination puts you in danger. He argued. Prime Minister. This attack is made out of jealousy. The Trade Federation because they want our business, either back to corporations because they want full control, other planets are jealous of our prosperity. We only recently joined the Republic but we already have major political influence. And the reason they did all of this is quite simple. I said, deciding to give them a cliffhanger. I agree, we would also need to transport the Bacta through space and have sufficient protection. Axel said as head of security. The influx of credits if we pull this off would be enough to put us along the top 5 within the core worlds. Prime Minister Jamie said. I agree with all of you. However, we don't have the capacity to take over immediately. We must instead prepare for a total defense. Axel, you're in charge of getting locations of every single location and the headquarters of the Zuckfer Corporation. Headquarters, supply depots, warehouses, archives, everything. Zuckfer has headquarters on Thyferra and therefore performs under the Thyferra government, which means we can confiscate all their equipment. I said as the Prime Minister nodded. I can confirm that the Zuckfer is under our government as a business and not an international one and therefore not under the Senate. Prime Minister Jamie said. Understood, Count. Axel said. Harry, what is the progress on the Bacta? I asked. We needed funds to take over Zuckfer. My lord, the 18.4 million Vradix is creating 1,104,000,000 liters every single month. So, we earned 1,104,000,000 credits last month in Bacta. We also earn 1,218,750,000 from Zuckfer every month, a total of 2,332,750,000 credits. We then remove 50 million in soldiers, 10 million in navy, 112 million in police, and 92,400,000 in enforcers. We then remove the Republic tax and government spending, and we suddenly only have 407,425,000. And then we do the same with month. We got 1,308,000,000 credits in Bacta, and a total of 2,526,750. And after removing the extras we have 468,625,000. He said. I see, that is more than fine. And what are our total credits? I asked. My lord, currently our credit savings are as follows. 407,425,000 last month, and 468,625,000 credits this month, a total of 876,050,000 credits. He said. Alright, very good. We'll direct 200 million of those credits toward creating and buying military hardware. 120 million to create and obtain 1,800 lots. Enough to carry our entire military, while the other 80 will go into the blueprints and testing. I continued. I also want to send 150,050,000 credits to the creation of the Gladiator 1 Star Destroyer. We will send 150,000 there every month. However, Prime Minister Jamie put in a request for 50 new class attack shuttles. The rest of the money will be sent to the creation of our own shuttle. I said, what about the last 500 million? Axel asked. 100 million will go to you with your spy network. Meanwhile, the rest 400 million will be to buy 40 Xyzer container transports and 500 A-class containers. Each Xyzer costs 1.15 million credits, and each container costs 150,000 credits. The Xyzer containers will cost 46 million credits. The 500 A-class containers will cost 75 million, a total of 121 million credits. However, we also need to hire 640 crewmen to fly these ships, and we have to buy potential escorts. We will assign 2 Z-96 headhunters to each ship. We will customize it with docks so our pilots can land. And as such we need 60 Z-95 headhunters. Admiral Jamie has your newest graduating pilots do these missions so they get used to the fighters. I said. Understood, Your Grace. Jamie said. Alright, also begin the training of pilots. Train over 100 every year, and make the training extremely advanced. Our pilots will be the best. If required, you can even have 3 years of military training. I said, and he nodded again. Axel, increase the police patrols around the Zuckfer headquarters. Jamie, order all the munificents to stop any Zuckfer vessels traveling out of the planet. I said. Understood, my lord. Both Axel and Jamie said. Now lastly, Alexander. Make sure to change the interrogator's discovery from only Zuckfer to Zuckfer and Zoltan corporations. I said as he nodded. But why? We can't take any direct attack on Zoltan as they are international and therefore within the Senate's responsibility. Prime Minister Jason asked. That's why I didn't tell you to gather information on them, because we don't need to and we can't. Zoltan is international and therefore must be taken up with the Senate. I'll call the vote the day after we attack Zuckfer Corporation. We will then strive to take control over the Bacta industry. I said, and they all nodded, understanding my intentions. Very good. That will be the end of this meeting. Notify me of any important discoveries and give me weekly reports. I said. I signaled for them to leave. The holotable's comms died out one after another as the counselors left. However, I didn't leave just yet. I pressed a few buttons, and I made a new call to somewhere on Coruscant this time, specifically the Senate building. The holographic figure of a man in senator robes, he was white, and had black hair. The style was similar to that of Obi-Wan Kenobi during the Obi-Wan series. He was 22 years old and about 185 centimeters in height. Your Grace, he exclaimed as he stood up from his desk. At ease. Representative Davis. How is it going in the Senate? I asked as he excitedly began talking. My lord, the politics in the Senate are truly immaculate. I have never been anywhere near the amount of manipulation, political power, and military power. It's the center of everything within the galaxy. Military powerhouses threaten and get their things by planting their ships in systems close to the receiver. Political powerhouses have their factions form up to pressure them and the manipulation. It's truly exceptional, he said as he waved his hands around. That is good. How are you getting yourself situated? I asked and he smiled. Your Grace, I have been blessed by your political ingenuity. The 4 major factions are doing everything in their power to get us on their side. The military faction has gotten me a large group of veteran Senate guards, and the peaceful factions have got me multiple good and honest connections, like with Toydarian and the Mon Calamari. The Core World faction has helped me set up hundreds of back-to clients, and the Rim faction has got me potential supporters willing to swear for us, but they need things from you, of course. He said. Very good. Get those supporting worlds to contact me within a few days. Hint to the military faction that I want to create alliances with militarily strong planets. Send the back-to clients to Jason. If they want stuff, then we can supply them. And lastly, the Peace faction. I want you to lean towards their faction, or more specifically Senator Palpatine. He's a strong and good senator, and offer our support to him in return for strong support from his faction. However, don't fully join their faction. We want to stay in the neutral zone. I said. Yes, Your Grace. I'll get it done, he said with a slight smile. Good. Now lastly, I need you to find senators, planets, witnesses, or anyone who has something to say against Zoltan corporations. We'll be pursuing legal actions against them for their actions against House Veridian and my family. They were one of the manufacturers of my father's assassination, and they must therefore be eliminated. Also, continue to secretly secure clients to sell our own Bacta. An example of what you can do is promise that we'll buy all the Bacta tanks from the Trade Federation if they support us. I said, and he nodded frequently, happy to be able to help in avenging my father. Yes, Your Grace. I'll make sure to complete the mission given to me by the holy leaders of Thyferra. Consider it done. I will not fail or I will be cutting my finger off, he said, not failing to throw in a few compliments about my house and showing loyalty. Not that I didn't appreciate some compliments about my lineage. It was both funny to hear and interesting. Representative Davis was one of the few who always had compliments lying around, waiting for the perfect use. I wonder if he had them written down in a book. I chuckled to myself as the hologram of Representative Davis died out. And with this, the stage was set. Yes, Your Grace. I'll get it done, he said with a slight smile. Good. Now lastly, I need you to find senators, planets, witnesses, or basically anyone who had something to say against Zoltan corporations. We'll be pursuing legal actions against them for their actions against House Veridian and my family. They were one of the manufacturers of my father's assassination, and they must therefore be eliminated. Also continue to secretly secure clients to sell our own Bacta. An example of what you can do is promise that we'll buy all the Bacta tanks from the Trade Federation if they support us. I said, and he nodded frequently, happy to be able to help in avenging my father. Yes, Your Grace. I'll make sure to complete the mission given to me by the holy leaders of Thyferra. Consider it done. I will not fail or I will be cutting my own finger off, he said, not failing to throw in a few compliments about my house and showing loyalty. Not that I didn't appreciate some compliments about my lineage. It was both funny to hear but interesting. Representative Davis was one of the few who always had compliments lying around, waiting for the perfect use. I wonder if he had them written down in a book. I chuckled to myself as the hologram of Representative Davis died out. And with this the stage was set. Chapter 16, Starfighter Training. In space above the planet of Thyferra, 60 fighters were flying around, dodging gray stun bullets. They were having a true dogfight, 30 against 30 however, the lasers they fired were unique. It wasn't the color red, blue, green, or even yellow. Instead, it was the color gray, and it didn't do any damage. Instead, whenever a gray laser hit the hull of the fighters' power would short-circuit for 2 seconds. After regaining power, they would simply fly away. This was a training dogfight. However, 2 fighters were standing out. The standard procedure and the most effective one was to work in teams of 2. Also known as flying in a section, there were 2 members in one section, a lead and a wingman. The lead fly at point, being the first to fight, meanwhile the wingman is just a bit behind to the back, protecting the lead against any fighter trying to attack from behind. The wingman was flying in an Alpha 3V wing starfighter, while the lead was in a much more advanced and special starfighter, the Eta 2 Actis-class light interceptor. However, the Eta 2 was way ahead of its time. It was currently 34 BBY, but the Eta-2 Actis was only introduced during the later stages of the Clone Wars, which ended in 19 BBY. The wingman was the pilot Fen Rao. He was of Mandalorian birth. He was currently at the age of 18. He had been recruited 2 months ago after graduating from the Mandalorian fighter pilot program. Although he had just 2 months to get used to the Alpha 3, he had already become more skilled than most of the Thyferran Starfighter Corporation. He was flying excellently, dodging gray lasers and obliterating anyone turning around towards his lead. However, the lead was also quite good. While not having the skill of his wingman Ren Fau, he was able to predict his opponent's line of fire and dodge it. His starfighter flew like a calm blade through the wind, looking around and shooting any opponents before they could get to him. The pilot was of special origin, Count of Thyferra, Lord of House Veridian, and Senator of Thyferra, Thalron Veridian. The 14-year-old Count was flying around outmaneuvering men well into their 20s and some even in their 30s. However, the other team was no slouch either. The opponent team lacked outstanding pilots like Thalron and Ren, however, they more than made up for it due to their tactics. The 30-man starfighter team was working as a team, having a squadron of 12 go around and hit major wins against enemy fighters, while the other 18 were fighting the rest. And as such the battle continued. This strategy was commanded by one commander Titos. The ace duo of Thalron and Fen went around slaughtering enemy fighters, while Titos was commanding an excellent defense with his 18 men while the 12 had no equals. Soon enough, Fen as the excellent pilot had extremely good eyesight and therefore spotted their tactics early. This is Orion 1 to Orion 0. I can see a squadron detachment in the enemy lineup hunting down single or double starfighters. He said over to comms. I had been fighting in the space for a few minutes now. I have spent any extra time over the last 4 months training in starfighter combat. I had played Star Wars squadrons, but truly, it was quite different in real life. I only got combat cleared 3 days ago and this was my first battle. I was flying with Fen as my wingman in my first ever practice battle when he notified me of the new strategy. This is Orion 1 to Orion 0. I can see a squadron detachment. I heard over the comlink. I was known as Orion 0 because I couldn't become an official member of the squadron. Orion was the name of our most skilled squadron led by Fen Rao himself. Should we intercept them? I asked over the comlink. The communications included either section, squadron, or group. A group is anything of more than 2 squadrons but less than 5. We currently use the section 1. But we should get reinforcements. Fen said over the comlink. Very good. I said before switching comms. This is section 1 of Orion Squadron. We are requesting assistance from 3 or more available sections to counterattack their infiltrating squadron at coordinate 3.48.2. I said and I got a few responses. Section 2 of Orion cannot help at this time. Section 4 of Orion will provide assistance. Where will we regroup? I guess Section 3 is down for the count. Section 5 of Orion cannot provide any assistance. Section 6 of Orion needs dire assistance. We are under heavy scrutiny from 2 enemy sections. Section 1 of Element is on our way. Section 6 please hold on. Section 2 of Element will provide assistance. Section 4 of Element can provide assistance. Section 6 of Element cannot provide assistance. Section 1 of Flame cannot provide assistance. So we lost 3 sections already, damn. This is Section 1, meet us at 3.43.2 and fly around if you arrive early, don't stand still. I said before switching back to Section Comlink. Alright Orion 1 let's move out. I said and I only got a slight MHM in response. I took the lead as usual and he followed me as we headed to the correct coordinates. The other 3 sections were already waiting. I switched back to Squadron Comms. This is Section 1. Follow our lead. The infiltrating squadron is heading towards Sections 6 and 7. I said as all 4 of our sections sped up to max speed towards the enemy squadron. This is Orion 0. We will be hitting them through the side. Push through their formation then disperse into your sections. I said as we closed in on the enemy squadron's positions. Hold fire. I said slowly. Hold fire. I shouted as I saw their fighters turn towards us. Probably spotted us coming. I sped up and launched 2 missiles. The Eta-2 had 4 missiles. I had already used 2 of them. However, the other 7 out of 8 total fighters launched a fury of laser. Missiles are extremely effective when they aren't expected and they therefore took out 2 starfighters. Meanwhile, the other fighters took out 3 starfighters in total, and Fen was responsible for 1 of them. I then turned to the astromech situated on the left side of the wing. R1, how many hostile ships are left? Beep boop bite boop boop bye. There's 7 ships in front of us and 4 incoming. Alright. I then switched to the squadron comms again. We got 7 hostile fighters and 4 incomings. Watch out for the reinforcements. Spread out. I said as I sped up and we flew out of the dogfight. I looked behind me to see Fen still following. I then turned the joystick heavily to the right, turning the fighter around back towards the dogfight. Pressing a button on my joystick, I released waves of electronic laser upon my fellow starfighter pilots. One unlucky pilot was chasing one of our pilots and he flew straight into my laser fire. He was down for the count. I then spotted his wingman gunning straight towards me, probably attempting a quick revenge. However, He was no match against Fen. He didn't even get to point his laser cannons towards me before his system short-circuited. However, that's when I spotted Tytos. He was flying with his wingman and another section, and he was using his third-party tactics even while getting his third party attacked. Orion, 1, let's go take out the commander, I said as he responded with a, "Aye, boss." I then sped up again, flying through and dodging fights. They had long gotten their 4-man reinforcements. However, we were only outnumbered by 1 as of right now due to mine and Fen's actions. Usually, a proper dogfight would take minutes. Not those 10 seconds Luke used. However, he had his reasons. 1. The X-Wing's unique gun placements allow it to shoot a lot and cover a lot of ground. 2nd, the TIE fighters didn't have shields. The Alpha 3 could take up to 5 shots before getting out, while the TIE could only take 1. And lastly, Luke was a Jedi, which honestly is a pay-to-win ability. Completely overpowered. Luckily for me, Tytos was more concerned with the general picture and looking for people to hunt. He saw that none of our sections had banded together and therefore didn't find a threat. And as such, he never expected to be attacked. Both me and Fen targeted the first fighter to enter our range, but he didn't survive for more than 5 seconds against our fury of focused strikes. We then moved on to the next. However, this one was prepared, and he was already swinging around, doing 360s when we got our aim on him. We focused all our firepower on him, trying to cut down their advantage. The 2 teams were equal due to our surprise attack, and if we took out this guy we would be leading. This continued for 1 entire minute until I heard something over the comlink. Orion 0, watch out. Tytos maneuvered around us without us realizing. He's now behind us with his wingman. I heard and I immediately looked behind me. He was right. 2 Alpha 3s had managed around us and were now on our backs. Fuck, evasive maneuvers, I exclaimed as I began swinging and turning. However, Tytos wasn't our best starfighter commander for nothing. He realized the potential destruction I and Fen posed, and he had called in reinforcements. And as any good commander will say, focus on the weak link. He had sent his best pilot on Fen, who surprisingly was the guy who kept us at bay for 1 minute, while he had 3 others on me. I switched on to the group comms. This is Section 1 of Orion speaking. Orion, 1 and I have been engaged by 4 enemy fighters and we badly require assistance. I have 3 fighters on me, I exclaimed through the comms. Orion, 0, this is Flame 1, I am 0.02 clicks out. Hold on for 1 minute, he said. However, I knew I couldn't hold out that long. The Alpha, 3 and Eta 2 were made for quick movement and intercepting. However, that worked on me as well. And 20 seconds after I made that call, my system short-circuited. Fuck. Orion, 1, I'm out. Good luck. And with that, I headed back to one of the munificents. I reached it in 20 seconds and I got my Eta 2 remotif to fit live blaster ammo and rockets. I then went out again and began practicing evasive maneuvers. I badly needed them. For minutes after I died, Fen appeared as well. Apparently, Tytos had switched his attack squad to Fen after I died. And when Fen died, he continued on to the rest until most of his original squadron was cleared and he then used them. 7 minutes after I died, the battle ended. Tytos won with only 6 fighters remaining. This was quite the feat, seeing as me and Fen destroyed over 5 fighters alone. After Fen arrived, we used the missile lock to fake fight, like they did in Top Gun. However, as the last fighters entered the munificent, it went wrong. I got a call from the Vice Admiral. Vice Admiral Howard. He was the only Vice Admiral and in charge of our defensive fleet. Or what it was called. It was basically a task force though. My lord, he exclaimed. Yes, Vice Admiral Howard? I asked as me and Fen stopped dogfighting. We just detected a single jump from hyperspace. It is not one of ours, he said. I looked at Fen as our fighters stood beside each other before looking towards the hyperspace exit. A single ship was there, however. It must be bigger than a CR-90. What type of ship or class is it? I asked. Due to the ship size and assumed guns, it should be a destroyer. We're currently running the number, he said. All right, order the ground hangar to prepare to send out fighters, and refit all the fighters back to live laser ammo, I said, and I got a yes, my lord. In return. Soon enough he came with a response. Meanwhile the destroyer was getting closer and closer. My lord. The ship size, customization, and number all point towards it being a Sabbath destroyer. From the mercenary Sabbath squadron, he said a bit fearfully. They were known for their cruelty. However, that is a dumb move of them, even if they are paid well. If I'm correct, then they have multiple of these destroyers, and a single can only carry 12 fighters. It would be dumb to attack us with 12 fighters and a destroyer when we have 4 munificents and 20 DP-20s. Vice Admiral, check for any additional fighters, I said. My lord. Scans show there are 48 fighters following the ship, all are Sabbath fighters, he said. Perfectly 60 fighters, equal to our training fighters. They would never score a major victory against our forces with that fighting force. However, they have the perfect force to combat our training session where none of our fighters wear ammo. Unless they were after me. However, they couldn't possibly know that. Unless they got assistance from someone influential, down on the ground, who could see the battle and potentially my recently received new shuttle arriving in space. How many fighters do we have? I asked. Each munificent has 40, but one munificent is currently switching the ammo to live. Another 20 from a second munificent is also gone. We only have 100 fighters on board the munificent. 100 Alpha 3s. We then have a further 150 Z6 on the ground. He said. Very good. Attempt to contact the ships. If they do not respond, then launch all our fighters and inform the ground fighters to prepare. I'll be leading the starfighter battle. I said, and I got the expected reaction. My lord. You cannot think of joining a live dogfight? You are the only leader and have no heir. Additionally, although you are more skilled than most of our fighters, you have only trained for 4 months. He exclaimed with a slight tremble. He'd probably get chewed off by the Admiral if he let me. He had unending loyalty towards me. It is fine, Vice Admiral. Assign Orion to escort me and I'll have Fen as my wingman. Order Tytos to return to the battle as the overall starfighter commander. I said as I and Fen sat there waiting. I guess this will be your first real battle, lad? He said like he was some experienced veteran. His ass was legit a few years older. Why are you talking like you're 40? You just graduated a few years ago. I said as Fen chuckled. Perhaps, but you're still a lot more greener than I am. Fen said. I was about to respond but Howard was too fast. My lord, they are completely ignoring our attempts to communicate, and their fighters have sped up. They are about to enter our range. Howard said through the comms. You know what to do. Launch all fighters and send the 10 DP-20s in orbit ahead. Have the munificent focus on the destroyers. I said and he nodded. It was the basic procedure while the rest were up to him basically. All right, Fen, we're heading into battle. I said into our comms as I saw tens of starfighters leave the munificent. Time for the green grass to grow. He said as he began chuckling like crazy. Crazy wannabe veteran. I said as we joined the other fighters. Chapter 17. First Starfighter Battle. All right, Tytos, you're in command of the battle group. I said to him directly through the comms. The starfighter formations were as follows. Section equals 2 men, a lead and a wingman, flight, anything above 2 men and under 12, squadron, 12 men or 6 sections, group, 48 men or 4 squadrons, wing, 96 men or 2 groups, battle group, 192 fighters or 2 wings. And lastly, we have battle wing, which is anything between 193 to 768. And then at last we have the battle corp, which is anything above 768. Honestly, the Navy hadn't truly set up a good starfighter system. Till now we just had the Vice Admiral and Admiral lead them. I planned on changing that soon. The highest ranking pilot we have is a captain, whom is Tytos. The highest unit we have is a battle wing, which should be led by a rear admiral. However, currently the highest ranking starfighter assigned officer is Flint, who is a commodore. Anything the size of a battle group or higher is supposed to have a naval officer above the rank of captain to organize them. And he cannot be flying. The highest ranking actual pilot is Captain Commodore, where a commodore can lead a battle wing plus and a captain can lead a wing. So the current situation works. But we need to get a commodore. I'll likely promote Tytos. However, that is not all. The Starfighter Corps is meant to be led by a Vice Admiral and co-led by a Rear Admiral. Going to have to get Jamie to get a few more command positions. Ignoring that, I went back to the battle. Orion Squadron, this is Orion 0, form up on Orion 1 in a wedge formation, I said, and they quickly formed up. They were the elite of the elite and spent very little time forming up. They formed up with Fen in the middle and 5 in each wing. I then placed myself in the middle alongside Orion 11. Tytos' voice then rang over the universal comms. All fighters be aware. Expected clash in 20 seconds. Stay with your squadron and stay calm. This is not a practice. He said as we flew. The 100 men would seem like a swarm to everyone else, but truly we were in a strict formation. The second best formation, called Ember, was at point. Everyone was flying in the wedge formation. Ember also had 2 wedge formations just behind them on their left and right. There was also a wedge formation above Ember but in the middle of the 2 other formations. And there was one under 2. That was the first clash formation. 5 squadrons. There were then 2 squadrons spread out at the frontal unit's flanks, a few milliseconds behind the first clash formation. And lastly, we had the support squadron staying in the back and ready to assist any formation struggling. Orion usually formed up the support squadron. If one side was weakening on our side, Orion would come and temporarily push them back until the previous formation could regain their strengths and numbers. At the same time, if an enemy side was falling, Orion would assist. However, we usually did the second thing. Admiral Jamie had come up with a pincer focus. Essentially, we put our top 4, 3, and 2 in the middle with 2 at point and 3 and 4 on his sides. Then the 5th and 6th were above to hold their enemies off. While the hardest job was for the flank and support squadrons. They had one task. Hold them off, stay alive. We usually had our weakest squadrons on the sides. They would usually endure 2-to-1 odds during fighting. However, in return, the weaker squadrons got support from the strongest. It was this delicate balance that formed our attack strategy. If the morale of the flank squadrons falls before Orion can arrive, then we are pushed backwards with Orion not being able to help. But if they hold on, then Orion can deal a damaging blow. We relied on the center to break through, piercing their center and attacking their flanks, completely surrounding them. However, the flanks also got more support. The standard issue was to have the support frigates on the flanks. We currently have 10 Corellian gunships or DP-20 frigates supporting us in the battle. We sent 5 to each flank. The DP-20s gave much-needed closure to pilots being hunted down. The DP-20 had some crazy point defense laser cannons and a lot of missiles. Magnetic lock missiles, heat-seeking, torpedo missiles. Therefore, the flank pilots were taught to head to the DP-20s if they were hunted by too many fighters. Often the fighters would back off when their prey closed in on DP-20s. Attacking a Corellian gunship in a starfighter not heavily shielded was a death sentence. You also needed missiles to penetrate the DP-20 shield before they penetrated yours. So, essentially the Corellian gunships were the true saviors of the flanks, and the machines that helped keep casualties to a minimum. If your shield is low, head to DP-20 to remove attackers, then Munificent to repair. Out of ammo, head to DP-20 for relief and then Munificent. Being attacked? Head to DP-20. DP-20 was basically a flying relief. This combined with the support of the best pilot is what kept the newer squadron's morale and calm at the max. And there is of course going to be someone saying something along the lines of, what the Sigma? The flanks have the secret potential to end a battle. Well, let me tell you something, you are not Napoleon with his speed, there is no cavalry in space. There is never a total victory. Sure, the fight against the pirates was, but that doesn't count. Basically, unless you outnumber your enemies 2 to 1 or have 3 times the skilled pilots, then it's just a shit ton of 1v1s. This is what makes Jedi pilots dangerous. It is for this reason that unless you outclass them, someone will die. Someone will fall. The flanks are the secondary battle, so when the main battle falls, they give up because they can't beat a force 3 times their size. That is essentially what space warfare is. Done with the technical part 1, turn my mind back towards the battle at hand. Intercept anticipated in 10 seconds. Tyto said. This is Orion 1. Follow my lead. You know the drill. Orion 0, you're my wingman. Fen said as I nodded, and we began slowing down. Falling behind the main force. Soon enough even the DP-20s caught up. Not that shocking though, as they were just barely slower than starfighters. Ember Squad. Push forward. I heard Tyto shout as the first line clashed on both sides. All right. Orion. Green Squadron on the right flank is fighting 3 enemy squadrons. You'll go there. I heard Tyto say as we sped away towards the right flank. It was barely 10 seconds away. All right, penetrate the battle and then split up into sections. Fen said as we closed in. As soon as we entered the range, the 11 Alpha 3s launched a wave of laser fire, killing 5 entire fighters. I also launched 2 missiles, both hitting their intended target. Missiles are meant for the first clash. There is no situation where they are more effective. We penetrated deep into the middle of the battle and we then broke off. I clearly saw Fen heading to the right, so I joined him, unleashing waves of fire while flying behind him, hitting anyone flying between us. By the time I reached him, I had already killed 2 fighters. Hello Fen, guess we're back at it. I said as I dodged a laser shot from the side. The enemy fighter quickly died against one of the Orion pilots. Though I didn't order it, all 12 of them were homing closely around me, protecting me silently. And like that, me and Fen continued flying around, demolishing pilots all around us. It went from 1 to 3 to 1 to 1 again. All right, Orion Squadron. Fall out. The right flank is secure for now and the left flank is under pressure. I heard Tyto say. He was flying around with 3 other guys staying in the back protecting the flank while leading the team. With that, me and Fen turned around as we began flying back. That's when disaster struck. I heard my astromech R1, also known as R1D2, the predecessor to the R2D2 model. However, he had been customized to be best at dogfights. Beep, boop, beep, bipe. 24 fighters closing in. He signaled in his beeping tone. What? I exclaimed as I looked at the scanners. There were indeed 24 and they were closing in from behind. Fen. 24 fighters closing in from above, less than 2 seconds behind us, and closing in fast. I exclaimed. Fuck, they must have recognized you. He exclaimed. Tytos. The Lord is in danger. 2 squadrons closing in. He said as he turned on to the squadron comms. All fighters, hone in on my position. 2 squadrons incoming. The Lord is in danger. He shouted as he slowed down. Speed up ahead, Count. He shouted as I zoomed past him and he hurried after me. 1 second behind Fen. I said as I looked at the scanners. I was going at the max speed, and so was Fen. It seems they have introduced advanced speeding on their fighters, probably to hunt them down. We're within range. I shouted as I began flying sideways, rolling, everything. However, it didn't matter. Shit. I'm hit. Shield integrity at 70%. I said as I looked back for a quick second. 20 of their fighters were focusing on me and 4 on Fen. Yeah, they knew it was me. I continued dodging as I spotted 3 DP-20 frigates and 10 fighters heading towards me. However, they were far out. Hundreds of laser bolts were shot out, and I somehow dodged 90% of them, but it was too little. Hit again. Shield integrity at 50%. I said over the Orion comms. I dodged another round, but I got hit a third time. Shield integrity at 35%. 3 seconds later I got hit a fourth time. Shield integrity at 25%. And 5 seconds later a fifth time. Shield integrity at 5%. And right after I got hit a sixth time. Shield are down, hull integrity at 50%. I shouted desperately. I couldn't meet my end this way. Hull integrity at 10%. The fuck, I was one shot. I looked behind me to see 4 guided missiles being shot. How the fuck do they have missiles? They locked on and came closer and closer. 15 meters. 10 meters. 5 meters. 2 meters. I can't dodge. Fuck. I had been trying to throw them off, swinging and turning and everything. However, that's when time slowed down and I saw the future. Where the bombs would hit, their precise calculations. I knew how to fucking dodge. I screamed internally as I pushed my joystick upwards, going straight up as the missiles followed me. My speed began falling. The missiles got closer. Until I reached my goal and I cut the engines. The ship then turned 180 degrees by falling backward. As I hit 140 degrees I started the engines and blasted forward, hitting perfectly at 180 degrees. I then overheated both my blasters as I sprayed down on the missiles. The first was down, the closest. The second was 2 meters away. I lasered that as well, killing it at 1 meter away. The third and fourth were both at 4 meters. I launched both my missiles on the third missile and focused the remaining of my overheating laser cannons could take on the fourth. Just as my cannons overheated and stopped working, the fourth was down. I then watched in slow motion as my missiles headed to the remaining locked-on missiles. Shit. The first missed. And as the second hit an almost perfect line on the missiles, something changed in the missiles. At the last second, it directed its direction slightly towards the right side of me, dodging the missiles. What? I exclaimed out loud as the missile headed straight towards me. There was nothing I could do. My lasers were overheated. My engine wasn't fast enough, and lastly, my missiles were gone. I watched as it honed in. 1 meter. 0.5 meters. And I closed my eyes. In the end, I would die by some insignificant missile. Without helping the trillions of people in the galaxy, those who trusted me. Maybe I didn't deserve a second life after all. However, 2 seconds passed. And no explosion. I slowly opened my eyes to see Fen zoom by and no missile in sight. You didn't think I was gone, did you? He said over the comms with a chuckle and playful tone. I swear to God I almost just died. Fucking Mandalorian. That's when the 3D P-20S and 10 Orion pilots flew straight into the clusterfuck of newly arrived hunters, fighting them off and sending them packing. Just in time for the entire fucking starfighter fleet to flee. Vice Admiral. Shoot the engines and hyperdrives of that fucking destroyer down. And prepare the boarding parties. They are not getting away. I said in a direct comlink between us. I then turned around and headed back to the Munificent. I had enough of fighting for today. Now what the fuck was that future seeing? Am I force sensitive? But that doesn't make sense. My father did a midichlorians and I had 5,000, which means I'm not force sensitive. Well, let's take a test when I get back. And maybe I got some news when I transmigrated, or I can just use force sense. Well, let's check that out later. Right now I'd rather just chill. I said as I flew back home. Watching the engines of the destroyer get destroyed, how fitting. Chapter 18, The End of Thyferra, 1. Alright guys. You know the drill. Get in there, arrest all the workers and set up patrols until we get everything squared out. I said. In front of me stood 50 officers. All of them a lieutenant plus and even some commanders. I will now call up the leader, their troops, and where they're going to. I said. Commander blah blah blah, 200 troops, 8 Lomba shuttles, 2 new class shuttles, 6 Z-95 headhunters, to Coruscant. Captain blah blah blah, 100 troops, for Lomba, 1 new class shuttle, 2 Z-95 headhunters, Corellia. Captain blah blah blah, 100 troops, for Lomba, 1 new shuttle, 2 Z-95s, Quat. And like that I continued. If you hadn't guessed already, I was giving the locations to Thyferra's business spots. I had gotten most of them, but I would finish all when we sliced their headquarters. I continued until I sent over 2,850 to different planets, 130 shuttles, 105 Lomba class and 25 new class, 150 Z-95 headhunters. I sent 100 to every major planet like Alderaan, Corellia, Cato, and Raxus. While I sent 50 to peaceful and not-so-corrupt worlds, and lastly 200 to Coruscant and Naval Hutta. Hutta due to the Hutt criminals, needed to make a deal with them. And Coruscant due to the pure amount of corruption. You all have 4 days to reach your respective planets, and some selected few get more. In 4 days we will raid the main Thyferra headquarters. You are not to do any raids before that. I said as all of them saluted and I signaled for them to leave. A lot had happened since the last attack. A total of 5 months had gone past. We had boarded and sliced the mercenary destroyer. And it was Zoltan who ordered the attack apparently. They saw a threat in me and after spotting my ship they sent for the attack, attempting to assassinate me. Oh well, just another witness and argument for the trials.
Representative Davis had done an excellent job gaining us multiple planets to support us and also getting benefits from all factions a lot of times.
We also had multiple clients who had confirmed their deals with us. Now that was not all. Militarily, we had gotten 150 Lambda-class shuttles made the last 5 months and also 150 Alpha-class V-wings, creating 30 every month. However, last month we increased the engineering corp, buying 2 additional flying workshops, and we could now produce 60 fighters or shuttles per workshop. We also currently had 300 lots after hiring Quat to make them for us. But we were now creating 60 every month. The prototype of the Gladiator 1 Star Destroyer was also halfway complete. It would carry up to 96 starfighters due to being heavily modified to mainly be a carrier and not a Star Destroyer. However, it was still barely a Star Destroyer. Following the assassination attempt made by the mercenary company, the security around me had completely changed. Alexander had taken his duty extremely seriously, always having multiple guards and escorts. He had even spent the last 5 months personally training his veteran unit. Do you remember the guys who fought against the pirates and only lost 20 men? Well, he had somehow gotten some mercenary who fought with electrostaffs to use them. He had gotten 4 staffs from the Mandalorian guards, but he had added purple energized electric properties. The exact same as the Magna guards used. But it still had the stun option, and the staff itself was stronger as it was imbued with slight Beskar. He had also gotten a veteran Mandalorian royal guard to join them, and he served as the captain of the unit and taught them how to block blaster bolts. Truly magnificent. And I actually had no part in it. It paid off to have good subordinates. Now on to the slow down time problem. After that scene, I tested myself again and found out I still only had 5,000. So I assumed I was a weak sensitive? The requirement to join the Jedi Order was 7,000. And as such I assume I can't use force push, pull, electro, choke, or any of that. I might be able to get a bit faster, sense, predict, and if I train enough maybe mind control? I'm not quite sure, but I will try if I ever get instructions. Oh, and on to the moon business. We have built a full moon base there that would put the Rishi station to shame. Not that it counts. It was equipped with 8 DBY, 827 heavy turbo laser turrets and 2 heavy ion cannons. It also had 20 laser cannons and 20-point defense cannons.
Like Rishi Station, it had a large transmitter on top, but this one could actually penetrate the jamming of every single ship.
So unless someone pulled up with a moon full of jammers, then we are safe. I had 200 men stationed on that outpost alongside a single Munificent and 5 DP-20S. It protected one of the only known entrances to Thyferra, which was positive. But sadly the hyperspace was an unknown thing and therefore a hyperlane could just spawn or be discovered. As I realized everyone had long left and I was just sitting there in my own thoughts, I turned on my comms. Alexander. Prepare the 2,000 Royal Guards. We're attacking the Zukfra headquarters in 4 days. Have the men get acquainted with the building layout and everything. Understood, Your Grace. He said. Ah, life was so good with so many competent subordinates. Well, I guess I'll head over to Lyra and maybe help her with that Imperator-class Star Destroyer. In history, Lyra designed the Imperator-class Star Destroyer to be the main naval powerhouse of the Republic Navy, as the Venator was more of a hangar. But what she did was essentially make a Star Destroyer with fewer guns and more hangar, which wasn't what the Empire wanted, so they threw it away for the Imperial class. Well, basically what I'm doing is having her fix the ISD's problems. Putting the shield generators inside the ship. I don't know which dumbass placed it outside. Same with the reactor. I kept the firepower of the ISD-1 and introduced a few heavier cannons, but I also gave advice on adding more point defense guns on the sides and beneath the ship, as well as above. The current design would allow it to fit 96 Alpha, 3 V-class starfighters, which was pretty great. However, I added a lot of space for the lots. The original Imperator and Imperial Star Destroyers used a lot of space up for the training areas, holding cells, and 2 large fucking tractor beams. I removed all of that and instead increased the passenger capability to 15,000, a total division, and added 50 lots. However, this had changed a lot in the original Imperator/Imperial. It had jumped the costs from a whooping 150 million credits to 200 million credits. It had also increased the length to 1,800 meters and 1,100 meters in width. While this may seem a lot to pack into one cruiser, it wasn't really that much. The normal Imperial Star Destroyer could take 72 TIE series fighters. By changing it all to Alpha, 3 and changing it up a bit, we can easily fit 96 Alpha-class V-wings. We then take out the 20 AT-ATS, 2 Gozanti, 30 ATST, and suddenly we have a lot of space. Of course, I built out the hangar a bit as I still want ground assaults and stuff, but yeah. I also changed the firepower up a bit. I had talked to Tame and Bach Weapons Manufactured and I had managed to put in a commission to build the octuple turbolasers. I have given them a whooping 200 million credits in return that we own the full design and they are not allowed to sell it to others. But that would be more than worth it for them as few wanted that heavy laser and 200 million was a great price. And as such I had helped her a bit towards the ISD, changing the main guns to octuple turbolasers. Lastly, I changed the original 60 turbo laser batteries to 30 and the heavy ion cannons to 30 from 60. I had then included a whooping 80 laser cannons, 30 where the ion and turbo laser should be, and 20 on the dorsal part of the ship, between the end of the ship and the octuple turbo lasers. Honestly, I have spent a lot of time with Lyra lately. She was barely 14 years old, but she was a genius in creating ships. Additionally, She was extremely mature. If I wasn't like 40 years old in my mind with my old life plus new life, I'd never find a common interest with her. She was also quite good looking, so I could be interested in investing in a relationship with her later. But not now. I have a few interests, but I can't even touch them before I'm 18. Anyone who has a wife or something knows it is extremely rare to find a couple who met before they were 18, or at least got together. Simply too much hormones or anything. Getting that out of my thoughts, I simply decided to relax. I had 4 days until anything significant happened. And with that, I headed towards Lyra. She was living in the palace, so it barely took a few minutes. I knocked on the door 3 times and a feminine voice responded. "Come in," she said, and I did so. I entered the room. The room was quite luxurious. She had a large double bed, a large window, a kitchen, an office, and refreshers. Everything one needs. She sat at the desk with the hologram of the improved Imperial, II and Imperator-class Star Destroyer. In my past lifetimes, maybe hundreds of strategists, engineers, information finders, everything. People who read the entire history of the Star Wars game, they all discussed and came up with solutions to fix the Imperial-class Star Destroyer. Very few went extremely in-depth, but the basics were better protection against starfighters, add more starfighters, have carrier support, and the TIE itself. But essentially the ISD was only good at capital-to-capital ship combat, which the Empire never did. One ISD could take most of their enemies' fleets. Well, we were working on that. As I said previously, more fighters, fewer turbolasers, more point defense cannons, and more normal laser cannons. Well, the best case scenario is that I'll build a max of 3 of each of these. I don't really need them for anything else. I see you're still working on the Imperator-class Star Destroyer? I asked, and she nodded but didn't look away. I am. The Imperator will be my finest work. It's the perfect capital destroyer. Of course you pointed out realistic differences, but that was because I'm not a strategist. Either way, I am getting close to finalizing the design. But it will be pricey to build a prototype and test it out. She said. Don't worry about it. I'm in the process of earning 10 times more within 2 years. I said, and she turned around and smiled. I can't help but notice that smile. She was quite the looker. While maybe not a mid-ala level, she was still top 10. That's great. With this, we can actually build these bad boys. She said with excitement. Indeed, but we would have to wait a bit. And I came here to both help you with the current designs and give you a mission for the next design. I said, and her face beamed up with a smile. She somehow enjoyed more work. Great. Well, I have some questions concerning the needs of every trooper. The Republic didn't want to give their guys a lot, and the Venator only took 2,000, so I need your expertise. She said, and I nodded and sat down beside her. Let's see. And with that, we spent 2 hours talking until it was time for me to leave. Well, before I go, I'll show you the new vehicle you can work on after this and while I get funds. I said as I put up a hollow projector. So, the Gladiator. While an excellent transport and small carrier, it doesn't fit our requirements. The Munificent barely has 40 fighters in each, while the improved Gladiator barely has 36 fighters. And the Gladiator costs more than the Munificent. However, that is not the problem. I need a large carrier with the capability to fight capital ships. My first option was the Venator, however, they lack in ship-to-ship combat, they rely on their starfighters, and it costs too much to have lesser firepower than the Munificent. I said, and she nodded along the way. That's why I came up with this design to be a middleman between the Venator and the Star Destroyers. The Valiant-class Star Destroyer. To improve the Venator, I've added only 6 on the wings, 3 on each side. Then I added 16 dBY, 827 at the front, 4 rows of 4 where the hangar would usually be. The Valiant would include 4 hangars, 1 large at the front, 2 on the sides and 1 under. A total of 240 V-wings and 69 Skirg H-6 bomber which we got from Palpatine. It will be 1,600 meters in length. It also had 8 giant torpedo launchers in the middle with 32 proton torpedoes each. I said, and she showed increased interest. Being one of the original designers of the Venator-class Star Destroyer. I see. She said. Chapter 19. Future Expansion. This will be a part of my 11-year building stage, whereas I will build 4 Imperator-class Star Destroyers, 8 Valiant-class Star Destroyer, and my personal Star Destroyer as main ships. Additionally, I will acquire or build 16 Gladiator-class Star Destroyers and 10 Munificent-class Star Destroyers as medium ships, 40 Cumulus-class Corsairs, and lastly, 80 DP-20S, 42 CR-90 corvettes, 150 Carrack-class light cruisers, and many other support ships. I said with a slight smile. This navy was enough to fight off an entire Republic fleet. However, that was fucking costly. Just the building of these ships alone would cost 3,631,000,000 credits. 3 billion credits. And it would cost about 363,100,000 credits each year to maintain them. But the truly terrifying prospect was the crew. Only one Imperator would require a whooping 37,085 crewmen. More than our entire navy together. 4 of them would take 148,340 crewmen. Larger than our entire military by far. A single Valiant-class Star Destroyer requires a crew of 15,000 and could hold 5,000 passengers. 120,000 naval crewmen for those 8. The Gladiator was lighter and only needed 1255 crew members and 16 of them required 2080 crewmen. The 10 Munificents each required 1200 crewmen, and 10 of them needed 12,000 crewmen. Each Cumulus needed 90, so a small amount of 3,600 crewmen. Each DP-20 needed 91 crew, and 80 of them required 7280. While not small, it wasn't large either. The 42 CR-90s required a total of 6,930 at maximum capacity. And lastly, each Carrack required 1092 men, a much bigger requirement than the other support ships. However, this was essentially a starfighter with the Cumulus's firepower, so it would be worth it. But still a total of 163,800 crewmen. Holy fucking shit. And in total it would be 181,610 crewmen for the support ships, 32,080 for the small capital ships, and lastly a whooping 268,340 crewmen for the 12 large capital ships, a whooping 482,000 crewmen. 482,030. Now, the sheer cost of recruiting 472,030 naval crewmen is just mind-numbing. Let's start with the equipment. Every single naval crewman requires 700 credits in their commando pistols, and 200 in crewman uniform. 330,421,000 credits. Enough to buy 2 Imperators. And 94,406,000 in naval clothes. That's a total of 424,827,000 for a total, excluding the replacements of uniforms, pistols, and everything. Now they also require 1,000 credits a month. So in 11 years I have to pay 482,030,000 every single month and a whooping 5,784,360,000 credits every year. Over 5 billion. Just let that sink in. I also need to get a shit ton of fighters. Imperator Star Destroyers equals 96 V-Wings, 288 total. Valiant Star Destroyer equals 240 V-Wings, 60 H, 6 bombers, 1920 V-Wings, 480 H, 6 bombers. Gladiator Star Destroyer equals 36 V-Wings, 576 V-Wings total. Munificent Star Frigate equals 30 V-Wings, 300 V-Wings total. Cumulus Class Corsairs equals 10 V-Wings, 400 V-Wings total. Carrack Class Cruiser equals 2 V-Wings, 300 V-Wings total. CR-90 Corvette equals 2 V-Wings, 84 V-Wings total. DP-20 Frigates equals no starfighters. With this, I need to buy 3 868 V-Wings and 480 H, 6 bombers. However, sometimes we need to replace the bombers on ships, so about 1,000 H, 6 bombers. That is 4 868 pilots, but we need about 7,868 for our current reserves, so 6 868 new pilots, each requiring 700 in commando pistols and 4,000 in their pilot suit. Which is expensive. 32,279,600 credits in total. And they require 1,000 every month, so 7,868,000 every month. Or 94,416,000 every single year. If we put that with a Navy pay, it comes out to 5,878,776,000 credits every single year. Now let us move on to soldiers. In terms of soldiers on ships, then we need a lot. Imperator Star Destroyers equals 15,000 Solidars, 45,000 total. Valiant Class Star Destroyers equals 5,000 Solidars, 40,000 total. Gladiator Star Destroyer equals 1,000 Solidars, 16,000 total. Munificent Star Frigate equals 5,000 Solidars, 50,000 total. Cumulus Class Corsairs equals 250 Solidars, 10,000 total. Carrack Class Cruiser equals 140 Solidars, 21,000 total. CR-90 Corvette equals 200 Solidars, 8,400 total. DP-20 Frigates equals 5 Solidars, 400 total. That is a total of 190,800 soldiers. Each requires 1,500 in their main blaster, 700 in their commando pistols, and 3,000 in normal armor. 286,200,000 credits in their main blaster rifle, the A310 blaster rifle. 133,560,000 credits in their secondary blaster, the commando pistol. Lastly, 572,400,000 credits in their armor. A total of 922,160,000 credits in their equipment. And for their pay, the pay is for 190,800 new troops, which comes out to a total of 190,800,000 a month and 2,289,600,000 a year. Alongside the old 50,000 men's pay, which is 50 million a month and 600 million a year, it is a total of 2,889,600,000 credits. If we add that to the naval pay, which is 5,878,776,000, it comes out to a total of 8,768,376,000, which is a bit under half of what we make in total, before taxes and government spending. Which in all honesty is just fucking bombastic. However, I also plan on recruiting an additional 159,200 to serve at outposts, military defenses, and just reserve. We do the same again, 1,500 in blaster rifles, 700 in commando pistols, and 3,000 in military gear, a total of 5,200 in expenses, which is a total of 827,840,000 credits. Together with the other initial military expenses, which is 922,160,000,
we come out to the total of 1,750,000,000 credits in initial army expenses. The monthly expenses of these are 159,200,000 yearly expenses at 1,910,400,000, or a total army expenses in 10 years at 400 million monthly and 4,800,000,000 credits every single year. Adding that to the naval pay of is 5,878,776,000, then we suddenly got 10,678,776,000 every single fucking year.
Now let's find out the initial costs of everything.
The army armor comes out to a total of 2,080,000,000 and the naval equipment comes out to 32,279,600 in pilots and 330,421,000 in naval equipment, which is 362,700,600. So military and navy equipment comes out to a total of 2,442,700,600. Now we have to add that to the naval crafts cost, which comes out to 3,631,000,000. And a total of both is a whooping 6073700,600. No light cost at all. However, it shames in comparison to military such as the Republic, Empire, New Republic and First Order. But it is still a lot.
Now let us look at yearly recruiting. To accomplish our goal we need to recruit a set amount every single year. In total, we need 350,000 soldiers, 462,030 naval crewmen, and 6,868 pilots, or 468,898 naval men. Firstly, the 350,000 soldiers. To accomplish this we split it into 11 years. So we need to recruit 32,000 soldiers every single year, which should be doable. We also need to recruit 50,000 naval crewmen every single year, which again should also be technically doable as we have 25 million humans or something on the planet. Now let's discuss the yearly pay for soldiers. This year it will be 600 million credits for 50,000 men. Next year it will be 984 million for 82,000 men. In the third year, it will be 1,368,000,000 for 114,000 men. Fourth year it will be 1,752,000,000 for 146,000 men. Fifth year it will be 2,136,000,000 for 178,000 men. Sixth year it will be 2,520,000,000 credits for 210,000 men. Seventh year it will be 2,904,000,000 credits for 242,000 men. Eighth year it will be 3,288,000,000 credits for 274,000 men. Ninth year it will be 3,720,000,000 credits for 310,000 men. 10th year it will be 4,104,000,000 credits for 342,000 men. 11th year it will be 4,200,000,000 credits for 350,000 men. Now the naval crewmen.
First year it will be 120,000,000 credits for 10,000 men. Second year it will be 720,000,000 credits for 60,000 men. Third year it will be 1,320,000,000 credits for 110,000 men. Fourth year it will be 1,920,000,000 credits for 160,000 men. Fifth year it will be 2,520,000,000 credits for 210,000 men. Sixth year it will be 3,120,000,000 credits for 260,000 men. Seventh year it will be 3,720,000,000 credits for 310,000. Eighth year it will be 4,320,000,000 credits for 360,000. Ninth year it will be 4,920,000,000 credits for 410,000. 10th year it will be 5,520,000,000 credits for 460,000. 11th year it will be 5,665,360,000 credits for 472,030. Sure, I wouldn't be the strongest world or man in the world at that time, but maybe the top 5 or even the top 3. But it all depends on the economy. My 10-year plan is simple. In 3 years, have all the Vratics under me. At that time they should have grown to about 100 million. If I get all those under my command, the back to creation comes out to a staggering 3,600,000,000,000. Over 3 trillion liters and 12 billion back to units, each of whom will sell for 3,000, which comes out to a staggering 36 trillion credits. This is not something to underestimate. I could fund the entire CIS and Republic Army at the same time. Well, I couldn't even get close to funding the Republic. Its true size and scale were so large and majestic that it was probably in the quadrillions. But the Republic Army itself didn't cost much due to the cost-free clones and few naval crafts. But I suspect the Republic needs to spend over 80% of its total economy just to barely survive, and 19% to prosper. They probably have less than 1% of a military budget, which would usually go to relief food and stuff. Well, the plan was still quite good. However, it wasn't my only business plan. I planned to create something similar to Damask Holding for myself. My future knowledge would be perfect. Investing in Quat, Rendil, and Techno Union would gain me extreme profits. However, I also planned on creating Veridian Medtech. I will slowly transfer the back to holdings and position into this corporation, and make it directly under the control of the Veridian family. Or more essentially me. If I ever lost power under a revolution or the Senate interfered, I would lose my back to profits. It would be much smarter to add them under Veridian so the Thyferran government would rely on us. I plan to control and invest in the medical supply known as Kolto, which was made on the planet of Monon. There are about 500 million Selkith on Monon currently. However, the Selkith lived under the surface with little to no connection to the outside world. The planet and the Selkith have been completely forgotten and they are not even a part of the Republic anymore. Even though they didn't technically leave, they are not paying taxes nor do they have a seat in the Galactic Republic. The Selkith are therefore a perfect species for me to once again enslave or use to get medical supplies. The Kolto can be used in similar ways to the Bacta. I estimate that each tank can be sold for about 1,000 credits, but each tank includes 600 liters. However, I would use it in other ways. Bacta was a heavy and dense material. It was therefore perfect for tanks, but it proved to have fewer quick solutions. I, therefore, plan to create Kolto injections. Each injection will take about 0.5 liters and it will significantly improve the rate of healing and subside the pain. I can sell 20 injections for 100 credits. So 100 credits per 10 liters, which is a good deal. However, Kolto as a substance is harder to get. It can only be hand-plucked from the surface by the Selkith species or harvested through large harvest tubes alongside the Hrakert Rift. There was no corporation with clear superiority in the medical market. Well, not for long. I plan to buy my way through the entire thing. I already have tens of companies producing different products that I am going to buy. Many of them are from the old Republic era, barely surviving by improving their products but never introducing new stuff due to being borderline bankrupt. Some companies are owned by large droid creators or others, and they can be transferred to me. Others are well-placed that might need a few trillions of credits. I have an enormous budget of 10 trillion credits to make this a thing. To truly understand the sheer possibilities of these 10 trillion credits are simple. The 25,000 ISD, 1 and ISD, 2 the Empire owned at its prime, comes out to a total of 3,750 billion. A bit under 4 trillion. I could buy double the amount of the Empire's ISDs. While that was large, it didn't compare to certain entities. The banking clan had hundreds of trillions if not quadrillions in their vaults until the Clone Wars. The Techno Union sells 100 trillion worth of ships each year. The Trade Federation gets 20 trillion by only controlling Outer Rim worlds and another 80 to 160 trillion in their trade. These gigantic corporations could fund 2 armies warring each other. That is how magnificently the Republic has failed in denying monopoly. Not that I won't take advantage of it though. Star Wars. Senator. Chapter 1. Thalron Veridian. Where am I? I said as I stood up. I realized I was laying down. However, it wasn't on the ground. No, it was quite comfy. In fact, an extremely comfy bed. Opening my eyes, I looked around. I was situated in the middle of a white room. It was hyper-advanced with doors without knobs. It had a luxurious space with a desk. The chair had control panels on the arm holders and there was a small keyboard on the desk. However, it was like the keyboard on an iPad. Lastly, in the middle there was a flat energizing square. Looked something like a lamp in the table. Why? However, before I managed to even think about why, thousands of memories, scenes and events happened in my mind. My birth, in 48 BBY. Mother dying the same day. Memories of my dad teach me of my heritage, the Veridian family, Counts of Thyferra. Thyferra was an elective monarchy. 117 million in population. 80% Vratics, the native species, 20% humans. The Vratics was a less evolved species and was slave labor. Zotsixi was the capital city. We specialized in Bacta, being responsible for about 95% of all sales. 2 moons, 2 trade routes, Rima and Shapani. 479 days every year. 7% of the planet is water. Zukfra corporate headquarters is situated on Thyferra. House Veridian owns 25% of it. How we became rich due to Bacta. We were the major seller of Bacta, even though we only sold to Zukfra and Zoltan. We had no navy, and only about 40,000 solidars. We had a total of 100 Z-95 headhunters for planetary defense, but no naval hangar. However, we had 6 CR-90s. Each could hold 2 Z-95 headhunters. The CR-90 corvettes were also outfitted with 4 dual turbolasers and 6 single turbolasers. We had a total of 38,000 infantry forces. We also had a small unit of 200 ground armored tank, but it wasn't a droid. It was another type. We also had 500 gunners and lastly 1,000 royal guards. I was taught in politics, military leadership, economics and ruling since I reached the age of 7. The Count of the Veridian family has always held the supposition of senator. Usually it is given to the heir when he is of age, but a count can also have the position if he doesn't have an heir. It is currently 34 BBY, 2 years before the conflict on Naboo. Our economical situation. Extremely good. Although there is 117 million people living on the planet, there is only 29 million humans. 1 human is basically equal to 3 non-humans on Veridian. They can't vote, can't join the military, can't own a company. This is how we have been suppressing them. And the Bacta industry has been flourishing. The 2 major corporations have yet to work together to increase prices and therefore they sell a lot and need to buy a lot. From our more than 15 million Vratics working directly under us without selling their own. Our profits are 9 billion from Bacta and 14,625 million or 14.625 billion credits from our 25% of Zukfra. But we can't spend everything as we like. 14 billion goes to government spending, 100 million to government officials, 1,812 million to paying solidars, police and enforcers. Another 10% goes to the Republic. And after there's only 5,350 million, And of that we spend 350,000 on maintaining our current forces and equipment, including tanks, fighters and corvettes.
5 billion credits left. And of those, half is usually spent on Vratics or personal projects. My father preferred building the cities. Oh, and one last thing. My father died yesterday.
Yeah, apparently we had a party and a bomb went off and he died. And I'm currently the Count of Thyferra.
But holy shit.
I'm actually in the Star Wars universe, and as the Count of a politically important planet. If my knowledge is right, then Thyferra joined the Confederacy of Independent Systems and was later taken over by the two Bacta companies by the order of the Empire.
Basically this entire planet was enslaved. Even the humans. To create Bacta. Well, I would make sure that didn't happen. After 2 hours of simply processing the memories, I stood up. There was a lot of them. From basic stuff like drinks and food, to advanced political factions. I walked up to my desk and sat down. My memories has given me some information on how to use it properly. I pressed a button and a blue screen appeared from the thing in the middle of the table, apparently called a hollow disk. First of which allowed me to call my assistant. And yes, I have one. He is more of my personal guard or guard commander, but it goes both way.
And with that I called my Lord Commandant on his comm link.
Alexander? Are you there? I asked, unsure if I called the right guy. Yes, my lord. I'm here. A manly voice came back.
Good. Call the council and tell them I will meet them in the meeting room in 30 minutes. They should all be here after the party, no?
I said. Oh yes. Right away, my lord. He responded and I closed the comlink. That's when I began thinking to myself. Why was he so startled? It shouldn't be out of the ordinary for me to call him like that. And with that I continued to grumble about it until I realized 5 minutes later. Of course. Am I stupid of something? My father died 24 hours ago and I've been in my room since. I guess I need to act a little bit sad. And with that I did the trick where you got yourself to cry by pressing a certain spot in your eyes. After 15 minutes it looked like I had cried my eyes out but had stopped some time ago. Great. And with that I quickly got my clothes on before I left my room. I was outfitted in a white shirt and white pants. House Veridian was known for their white clothes and hair. The corridor was quite magnificent. It was larger than any ship corridors but not too large. Quite similar to Naboo but not the same height. The walls were light brown but with white flags hanging down all around me. Pictures were also put on the walls. Outside my room stood 2 guards. They were actually extremely fucking cool. Their helmets was similar to that of the British Royal Guard, more precisely the white hair extension coming from the top of their head. They had metal helmets similar to ancient knights. They had a white cape coming down from their shoulders. They carried a short blade on their left chest and another in a horizontal line across their back belt. They had an A310 rifle that they carried and AA-180 blaster pistol in their holster. They had Durasteel chest, arm, and shoulder armor. They had white wraps and thin armor around their stomach and waist. Lastly, they had Durasteel foot armor. There was 2 uniforms, one for officers and one for soldiers. This was for the Royal Guard. Image insert of both. However, I didn't have any officers with me currently. They were too busy hunting down the potential attackers. Once I stepped out, I nodded to both of them before walking on, as I usually did. And they both followed me wordlessly. After 8 minutes of walking through the large corridors, I reached the main hall, where my usual seat was situated, similar to a throne. However, we continued on and behind the main hall and into a small room. Outside there already stood 4 guards. The corridors were large and the corridor had 2 entrances. 2 guards at each entrance and lastly my 2 guards stationed themselves at the door to the room, once I entered. When I entered there were already 6 people there waiting, whom all stood up when I entered. Please sit, we have a lot to discuss. I said as I sat down at the main chair. I could feel a lot of stares from the 6 individuals but I ignored it. Firstly, Count Thalron. I wish to offer my condolences. A man in his 60-foot AS said. Thank you, Prime Minister Jason. But let's not dwell in the past and look forward. I said as those who wanted to offer it didn't. Firstly, Lord Commandant Alexander. How is the search for the potential terrorist going? I asked and he stood up. My lord, military intelligence suggests that there could be multiple factors. Both Bacta corporations had a motive, alongside the native species. However, it could also be a plot from your enemy government. The Trade Federation has been heated for some time. He said before sitting down. I see. Order the military intelligence to focus all their manpower on this situation. Admiral Jamie, order 4 CR-90s and 2 escort squadrons to prepare for departure. Meanwhile, order all other forces to be on guard. I said as I turned to Jamie, the chief of our navy, even though it was small. That was when someone stood up abruptly. My lord, you can't possibly think of traveling now? Prime Minister Jason exclaimed. Yes, I do. I simply said without explaining myself. Why? Your safety is imperative as you are the only heir to the Veridian family. Additionally, the recent assassination puts you in danger. He argued. Prime Minister, this attack is made out of jealousy. The Trade Federation because they want our business, either Bacta corporations because they want full control, other planets are jealous of our prosperity. We only recently joined the Republic but we already have major political influence. And the reason they did all of this is quite simple. I said deciding to give them a cliffhanger. I watched through the drone as Alexander, John, and Rob jumped through first.
John and Rob took left and right respectively, blocking the continuous laser stream coming from each of their opponent's blasters. However, they only needed to block 3 bolts before they entered range and killed each of their respective opponents. Alexander meanwhile had jumped straight forward into a roll. He had then taken out his commando pistol and shot the 2 men at the controls while spinning his staff with his right hand, blocking all laser. 5 other Praetorian guards then pushed through and jumped the 3 remaining men. Chon then began working on the control panels alongside 3 other slicers. Have them report any damage to the information, I said as I leaned back in my chair. The battle was essentially over and I moved my eyes towards the main entrance. About 9001000 workers had arrived. They had been put into a circle and forced on their knees or ass. The original 100 men had gotten 200 reinforcements, boosting their numbers to 300. And with that time passed quickly. General Tyr also relaxed but continued to give small orders and organize the troops. He had gotten 80 lots to extract the prisoners and get them into the army headquarters. Soon enough, Chon and his gang were done. The hologram of Alexander and Chon appeared in the situation room. My lord, we have successfully sliced the network, Alexander said. Very good. Brief me on the information, I said, and Chon began speaking. Your Grace, me and my team have successfully sliced the command center. They tried to get a message to their CEO who is currently at Coruscant, but it failed due to the Munificent's extreme skill in jamming. Lastly, they deleted the records of a certain bank account. I suspect it to be an offshore bank account with emergency funds. We are currently tracking it down, he said as he took a slight breather. The pirates were correct. I have hundreds of receipts and records of Zukfra hiring multiple teams on us. The pirates who killed your father, the mercenary squadron, they've also been funding a Vradix uprising, he said as fury spread through Alexander's, Tyr's, and mine. I was beyond furious. Sure enough, they killed my father. I didn't know him and as such didn't really care. This isn't a world where I can cry because of a supposed father I didn't know. But funding a Vradix rebellion, now that is stepping above the line. If the Vradix rebelled, we would have serious financial problems. The Vraxti are many and strong. They are almost invincible in the green lands of Thyferra due to their body and ability to jump a lot. We would suffer immense casualties, and if they won, the humans would be enslaved. However, there are also records of Zoltan cooperating in funding the operations. And lastly, we have the names, numbers, and locations of every single Zukfra client. A total of 50 clients. And on average, each of them buys 100 million liters of Bacta, and they always try to get more each year, he said, and my fury dispersed. This was great news. If the transactions were correct and each wanted to buy more, then we could sell all 9 billion liters on just these clients. Of course, we needed to introduce more clients as we were making more and more Bacta every year. Very good. Finish up with the slicing, then download the information and have them transferred here, I said as I waved them off. General, give the green light to all our special forces and use our newly gained information on hidden stuff to send out more units, I said as I stood up and walked towards the exit. My lord, it will be done. And what will you be doing, he asked, always enthusiastic about future plans. I'll make preparations for the Thyferra vs. Zoltan case and capture the missing Zukfra CEO, I said as I left the situation room and headed to the palace.